that I cut Adam off. Hey,
I know.
everybody. Hope you're all
Perfect.
doing well. Happy Thursday. Today we're gonna look at this. Look at this title. Wokeness is on the verge of what? What is it
Yeah.
on the verge of?
Who knows?
Who knows? I was waiting for Adam to say. Anyway, so
You
today
were waiting for me to say
I
wokeness
know. I
is on
think
the
it says
verge of sleeping with your mom.
there you go. So today there's been so much controversy. Me and Adam have argued about this, a little bit back and forth
Ad
in the prior
nauseum.
shows.
Yeah. Sitch has
Yes,
gotten very frustrated. He's been like,
yes.
oh, man, why do we
I've
have to
not.
keep talking about this?
No. I've not been frustrated. Adam just repeats himself and goes into a loop, and then I'm like, oh, this NPC.
Not true. Not true. I constantly bring up new things about this
There you
nonsense,
go.
but whatever.
But I know this. So there's been a lot of controversy
Mhm.
about James Lindsay, who has been, attacking the quote woke right. What does that mean? Is it a good label? Is this accurate? How does this all work? And we said, okay, listen, let's stop arguing about it. Let's watch him talk about it. There's two clips or two parts of videos we're going to watch. There's James talking about this with Konstantin Kisin. And then recently he had a conversation with Michael Malice about a bunch of things, but he touches on the woke right stuff and adds some additional context to it. So I thought it'd be interesting to watch that, and then me and Adam could have our true agreement on it, because obviously we're going to agree on everything.
No, we probably won't, but that's why people like the show. So what give your definition of wokeness before we get into this? Because I mean, I think a good synonym for wokeness is just DEI. Like when they talk about wokeness on Fox News, they're talking about DEI.
Well, okay, so there's two. Okay, there's the behavior and there's the ideology, right? And I think most people, when they talk about wokeness, they're talking about the behavior, and the behavior they're talking about is this sort of puritanical cancel culture. You have to fall in line with what we say, or we're going to go after you.
I
Behavior,
I
right?
completely disagree. Like if you wokeness is a term that has officially gone mainstream. Like you see and hear it in mainstream circles. And I just when you hear it and see it in mainstream circles, I don't think that's what they mean.
Almost every person that's like a normie I've talked to, when I ask them about wokeness, they specifically jump to behavior, not the ideology. The ideology will come in there later, but it's the behavior that sets everyone off. Is cancel culture? Is this you have to fall in line and believe what we're saying, or we'll
Okay.
attack you to the ends of the earth? So, but hold on. So there's the behavior and the ideology, and now obviously the ideology is, and I've said this many times in the show, the ideology of wokeness is waking up to the fact that there's all these systemic injustices and systemic problems in society that cannot be solved via liberalism or classical liberalism or individualism, Western capitalism, however you want to phrase the word, whatever makes you feel comfortable, and that the only way to solve these problems of systemic injustices against people is to adopt usually a far left Marxist, cultural Marxist philosophy. And that's the only way to solve these problems.
Right.
And that's how I've basically defined wokeness the last 3, 4, 5 years.
Right. And when I look, and obviously I haven't done any sort of peer reviewed study on this. I'm seeing people use the term wokeness
How
and,
dare you?
yeah. So look, when I hear, and obviously wokeness has gone mainstream, you hear people talking about it, you see it in mainstream media all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've always thought of wokeness as kind of a synonym for DEI. And the problem with DEI, most people identify is that it erodes the meritocracy. So everything that you're talking about doesn't really touch on that, especially the we need to adopt communism. Now,
Everything, no,
wokeness,
hold on. Everything I'm saying does adopt on that. I'm just not, I'm being as general as possible,
right. Well,
which
I
now,
could see where it would touch on it
because
in
everything,
the
yeah,
terms
everything,
of communism erodes the meritocracy, right?
yeah,
Obviously.
the whole, like, okay, because obviously there's a lot in wokeness, right? There's everything you're talking about. There's the DI, there's the oppressor narrative, there's the critical theory perspective, there's the anti-individual perspective. There's all these different facets of it. Instead of like going through the 10, 20 different things, I just say, leftism, Marxism, cultural Marxism as this large encompassing of everything. Now I understand that if I'm talking to someone who's uninitiated, that might not give them enough information to know what I'm talking about, right? But if I'm talking to you and our audience who has watched us cover this stuff for however many billion of years that we've been doing this, I feel like people know, they understand that all those things are just part of the broad category that I'm using here.
Right. Yeah. I'm always I'm always careful about linking it to the communism thing because I do think the right has called everything communism in the past, and that's created this boy who cries wolf
Correct. Yeah, that
situation.
is correct.
Yeah, which so um when I think of wokeness, I always go back to the original definition of wokeness on the left. The left said this is being awakened to systemic injustice.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't necessarily know that traditional definition that they've used is attached to communism in any way. Like they perceive the world as just unjust to marginalized people. So and being aware of that, and you kind of have to be on your game so that you can respond to the racism or sexism or homophobia that's going to be coming at you in the environment. So I think that's the left's the left's terminology for it, and then the right is kind of, they don't necessarily believe that this is an accurate assessment of the facts on the ground now. Like they think things have gotten a lot better for racism, sexism, and homophobia. So therefore they perceive of this awareness of all of that systemic injustice aimed at them as a delusion. So I think a lot of the left and the right are using the same terminology, but the fight is really over what are the facts on the ground. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the conceptualization of wokeness that I have.
Okay. So, but just to add on the origin of the term. So, in the 20s, usually Marcus Garvey is the guy who is associated as like coming up with or sort of leading the charge on woke, even though when he used it, he didn't say woke. I believe he said wake up
Mm-hmm.
specifically. And when he said it in the 20s, he was advocating for the term in the context of black socialist nationalism, black leftist nationalism.
I
So
don't.
from
Okay, go
so
ahead.
from the earliest point of conception, it was a leftist black nationalist term. But then in the like late 30s, early 40s, when people started, this is my understanding, when they started using woke, it was meant more into what you were saying, which is like this, just be aware of like danger. If you're a black person in the South, you might get lynched or something. Like just stay woke,
Yes.
stay aware, right? And then in the 60s and 70s, it kind of got used again. And I think it's sort of, I don't know exactly where it was in the 60s or 70s, but then obviously today, or in the last 10 years, when it came back, it did have the specific, at least the people pushing it originally from the top, it had the specific socialist connotation to it. Now, obviously, a
Right.
lot of people, like when they popularized it, there's all these like foot soldiers and people on the left who don't understand that they're essentially being tricked into supporting socialism or far left ideology when they advocate for all this nonsense.
Right. And look, that can be the original origin of it, but I think if you ask 100 people, you do some sort of peer-reviewed study, I think those people, a lot of them would agree that marginalized people are discriminated against, right? Which
Right.
we would classify as woke, being aware that marginalized people are discriminated against. How
Well, I,
you
I wouldn't
solve that
classify that as
problem is
woke,
where
though.
there's a how you solve that problem is where there would be a difference of opinion, right? Some of you're saying a lot of people would solve it through some sort of socialism. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of the people I think that you ask that would say like systemic injustice it exists, discrimination exists, they would say we need to solve it through liberalism, color blindness. They would have a completely different solution
Right,
to it.
right.
Yeah.
Well, but this is why, like, when I'm defining it, I'm trying to be just being aware that, and this is kind of the trick, and this is the stickiness of the far left and of the far wokeness and how people are kind of suckered into the ideology. This is how, and this is true not just of the far left, this is true of all cults, all extreme ideologies, is that there's a critique or a criticism of society that is true.
Yeah, has
There's
some
something,
element.
yes, there's some element of something that's not being addressed. And they say, oh, there's this problem, it's not being addressed. So people listen, they say, oh, you're right, there is this problem. But then the solution is like terrible. And so, yes, obviously, and this is not true just of America, this is true of anywhere in the world. If you're in a minority in a population, you're going to face different issues than the majority in that population is, whether it be overt bigotry, whether it be the quote implicit bias, whether it just be a sense of alienation as you could be like, hey, I'm not Christian and I live in a town where everyone's Christian and they put up all the Christmas stuff and you hear all the Christmas music and maybe it makes you feel weird because you're like not partaking in any of this stuff, right? And that could be like part of the systemic oppression against you. You could perceive it that way, right? And so the idea that a minority group is going to face a different reality than the majority is just generally a fact of existence. And so that's like the kernel of truth. So I don't want to associate wokeness with just saying, okay, realizing that there is this thing that minorities face or that there is a systemic issues that people face, because that's just true. It's realizing, it's waking up that there are these systemic injustices that people face, but it's believing that only this sort of anti-liberal, leftist ideology is the way to fix it, is specifically built into it that colorblindness and liberalism does not work.
Right. Look, and so I would say wokeness is like when you're talking about somebody, you're basically saying a lot of people. Well, let me clarify here on your definition. You're basically saying someone that believes systemic injustice exists or that marginalized people are discriminated against. That's not necessarily woke. A lot of people believe that, but they're not woke.
Right.
Woke is when they step over the line and they're advocating for some sort of socialism. That's when they step into the wokeness frame.
Yes. So or some form of far left, some anti-left, generally far left ideology.
Right.
And I would far left. Yeah.
I would say that it's not necessarily the advocating for socialism, although what I am going to say, I think you could frame as advocating for socialism. I don't think they would frame it as advocating for socialism. I think they would frame it as liberalism. But I would say wokeness is when people are overstating the problem. I think the thing that we're looking at with wokeness is when they're saying, white supremacy is everywhere, right? People want to kill trans people, right? They want to genocide trans people. When they're overstating the problem, that's when we look at those people and say, okay, they're wokeness. They're woke. They've drifted into this delusion about the reality of the situation. And that's a lot of the conflict between the left and the right. So, and the solutions that a lot of the people on the left are proposing, they propose them all the time, is like representation in movies, like affirmative action, so that we can mirror whatever the population is with whatever vocation it is that we're staffing, right? So I realize that you can call those things. You can say representation is like socialism, right? Or affirmative action is like socialism. You could definitely, a lot of people have said affirmative action is illiberal, right? But I don't know that people readily think of those things as like, I'm advocating for socialism. Like I think people can say, I want affirmative action, and we wouldn't think of that person as a socialist.
Right. So I agree that a lot of people who are advocating for what we would consider woke policies do not realize that they're advocating for anti-left Marxian inspired solutions. They don't realize that, but that's what they're doing. They just don't understand it. I would be careful with because I agree with you in terms of if you're woke, you tend to, what did you say?
Overstate the problem.
The problem. That is definitely a behavior that is woke. I think that usually when we're trying to define things, you're trying to figure out both a definition that's general enough or broad enough to catch everyone in the movement, but also narrow enough to catch only things that are specific to that movement. And I think that definition is a little too general or a little too, it's like a lot of people that overstate the problem. And in fact, actually that definition would completely align with, calling the right woke, or the Groypers woke
because they're
because
overstating the problem
of
of
Jews and stuff like that. Oh, the Jews
right,
are everywhere. Jews are everywhere, right?
right.
So they do that. I just don't know if I would say that. To me, I wouldn't say that's like the definition of it. That's just something that woke people tend to do.
Okay, I guess we can watch some of this video then.
Okay. Now you
Hopefully
want to
that
watch the.
clarifies both of like both of our opinions of wokeness.
I mean, I don't know if it really does, but
I think it does. Like I I hear people in media talking about wokeness, and I just they have a specific. And look, when they're talking about it on Fox News, which I would consider a mainstream media source,
mm-hmm.
they have no hesitation linking it to socialism or
Right,
Marxism or anything like that.
right.
So I don't necessarily know if that's helpful because a lot that turns off a lot of the center, a lot of the normie voters, a lot of the constituents you need to like maintain power. So
No, right. But we have to be very, and this is going to come up in this conversation. We have to be careful to split this into two between what is objectively true and what is persuasive,
yes,
because those can be very different in a lot of circumstances. So you could be right that it is not persuasive to say wokeness is socialism. That could be 100% true, but it could also be objectively true that wokeness is socialism on an ideological level.
yeah,
Now, you
yes.
wanted to watch the beginning part of this where they kind of briefly talk about woke, whether woke is dead or not, and then we can
Just
jump
just
ahead.
to kind of get like our definitional bearings because like the video is called "The End of Woke?" question mark with James
Mhm.
Lindsay. Both of these guys, I mean, if you did one of those number categories of words used, I mean, woke is probably. I mean, this is like a woke rich environment here. They're saying woke right and left.
Yeah, of
So
course.
we're going to try to pick out of context what they actually mean and
Right.
see like if it maps onto the left right thing. So
Yes.
I
And
think
then
there are
we'll,
ways that you can, but my critique has always been that woke, I thought woke was a useful tool to separate the left and the far left,
mhm.
which going back to our very first live stream where we watched
Wow, look at this.
the Jordan Peterson debate, right?
Hmm.
With I can't remember who he was debating. I think it
Michael
was
Eric Dyson
Michael
and
Eric Dyson. That's exactly
what's her
right. Yeah.
face, the New York Times lady.
Right. And those two people were so inside what we would call the woke bubble, right?
Hmm.
That Jordan Peterson asked a question about when the left goes too far, and Michael Eric Dyson counters with when does the right go too far? And Jordan Peterson says, like, how about Nazi Germany? Like, that's when the right
Right.
goes too far, right? It's
Right.
very clear, right? There's this ethnocentric component that it makes it very clear when the right kind of dips into the far right. Then
Hmm.
it's not as clear on the left. Although maybe now after the Palestine thing, you can say, well, it's when they dip into like the ethnocentric type stuff as well on the left. So,
Right.
but there was no clear definition, and Michael Eric Dyson like didn't even really understand the argument that Jordan Peterson was making. So even from that original thing, I've always conceived of wokeness as this kind of exercise in how do we distinguish, like what do we look at to distinguish the far left from the far right? In
Hmm.
that thing, Jordan Peterson says equity, like equity,
Right.
radical equalities when he thinks they dip too far. So
Right. But so using like the not like so this is interesting. So and I'm glad you brought this up. Jordan Peterson says when the right has gone too far is Nazi Germany, when the left goes too far is equity.
yeah,
And
radical
so
equality,
right, which you could say is, like
socialism, yeah,
socialism
definitely,
or
or Marxism, yeah,
yeah, if you were to use the same analogy or same frame that Jordan Peterson used, you said, Soviet Russia, right? And if you look at World War II, you had the war was the three ideologies and the Cold War afterwards, the three ideologies fighting each other. It was liberalism versus fascism slash Nazism and socialism. And then briefly and then afterwards, after the war started, socialism teams up with liberalism, and then the Cold War starts and it becomes when once fascism and Nazism defeated, it becomes socialism versus liberalism for the next 40, 50 years. And
Right.
so even in Jordan Peterson's telling of it, when he talks about when does the left go too far, when does the right go too far, it's when they stray away from the bounds of liberalism. That is what that his answer means. He's
Hmm.
just using Nazi Germany and equity as more of a grounding point because when you say liberalism, most people don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And this is kind of what I've been saying is that liberalism is the Overton window in the West. The Overton window of acceptable political ideologies from both the left and the right is this spectrum of liberalism, and everything outside that bounds is just outside the Overton window and what people consider the fringe or the far left or the far right. And
Right.
it's unfortunate because the term liberalism has become so lost, so confused because of the association of liberals, meaning Democrats in America, that like it just people don't know what the fuck you're talking about when you say like the average person doesn't know what the fuck you're talking about when you say liberal, or even if they do know, a lot of people, I think, a lot of people, even if they understand the concept, they still have such a negative intuition, such a negative emotional reaction to the term liberalism because they've basically been programmed for 30 years to not like liberals if they're on the right.
Yeah. And I mean, I just think this is a huge divergence from the project that was at hand, because the way that I'm conceptualizing it is you've got ethnocentrism on the right, you've got radical equality on the left, which are
Yeah.
completely different like conceptual models of how the world should be structured, right? These are the goals of the two factions. And now we're saying, look, because both of them have a tool that they want to use to implement their ideology called illiberalism, right? They want to might makes right, um, enforce their ideology by the sword. That's the similarity between them. We're saying that they're the same, which I'm like, I think they're completely different problems to address conceptually. So I like the framing better of let's look at what they want to achieve. Let's look at the
Mm-hmm.
goal that they want to achieve. Let's look at the world that they want to render as the defining factor about them, and not how they plan on doing that.
Well, yeah, no, I understand I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree with it. Um,
I mean,
but
we do a lot of the liberalism that we are in
mhm.
favor of, we enact by the sword to some extent. I mean, I'm always talking about how I love the irony of that.
What do you mean?
Well, we say, look, you, we say we want a society
Mm-hmm.
that fosters a lot of individual freedom, right?
Right, right.
And we're going to force you to live that way.
Mm-hmm.
That's what liberalism is.
Right. Well, okay. If what you mean by that is just any culture, any society, any government will have to use the threat of violence to maintain its laws and order, then I mean that's just true of anything,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
That's the point I'm making.
Yeah, but the difference I would say, because usually when people say like when they talk about the far left or the far right, you being by the sword, what they mean specifically is there's going to be an authoritarian leader who's either A, going to by the sword make it so you as an individual have to believe and follow what they're saying, and or B, start invading its neighbors and make them all also follow the same, strict ideology. Where with liberalism, yes, there's a police force and set of rules and you can't violate the laws. But if you're in your own home, you can believe whatever the fuck you want. You have free speech. You can say whatever the fuck you want to an extent. Obviously, you can't advocate for violence or something. But you have so much more latitude of behaviors, beliefs, and things that you can do than under any of these other ideologies. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good thing to put them all together and say, well, they're all technically by the sword. I don't think that's a useful conception.
Uh, I mean, it's not a comfortable conception.
It's not a question of comfort. It's a question of it's when we use terms, they're supposed to denote specific meaning. And when you say like, oh, these far left and far right are authoritarian or they're by the sword, people know what that means. And to me, it feels like a completely con categorical slippage and almost like you're giving this weird tool to the far left and the far right in a way that you don't mean to be dishonest, but they would use dishonestly to try to say, oh, our incredibly authoritarian ideologies where we force everyone to believe that what we want to believe is actually the same as liberalism, because in liberalism, if you break the law, you go to jail, which obviously those are completely different things. Like there's a very difference between saying like, if you go
Liberalism,
out and harm someone through physical violence, you go to jail, versus saying, oh, if you don't believe in racial equity or you don't believe in Jesus, you go to jail. Like those are two completely different, three very different things. And you shouldn't compare them all together.
we're talking about ways of structuring society, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, liberalism is winning.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Hugely winning.
Yes.
And there are a lot of people that buy into it, obviously, of their own volition, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of people that don't.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
so
Right.
what do we do with those people who don't buy into it?
They could do whatever they want to do as long as they're not breaking the law.
Right. Okay.
I'm just saying you have to be careful, because I don't want you, and I don't think you want to basically create a gun and hand it to people that will use it against you and say, here's a gun, shoot me in the face, please. And I feel like that's what you're doing when you categorize things like that.
You feel like I'm making a case for authoritarianism.
No, you're not making a case for authoritarianism. You're giving them a tool they can use dishonestly to advocate for authoritarianism.
Right.
And I'm like, well, don't do that.
Well,
Don't do that thing.
I think they're going to use whatever they can to advocate dishonestly for authoritarianism.
Well, of course they will.
Anyway.
Of course they will. Right.
My,
But don't,
my,
why help?
Well, my only point is to make the distinction when you're basically setting everything up. So you're saying the ends are the only thing that matters, or the means are the only thing that matters, and the ends are just irrelevant. Then you're kind of in this situation where you're pitting yourself against everyone else.
But it's not.
I mean, to some extent, power does matter. I mean, we've always said
matters.
that.
Yeah. No one would ever say otherwise. But that's part of the genius of liberalism and the liberal system, is that we're creating checks on power.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at left and the far right, their argument, which is false, is that they say none of those checks exist. That's all just an illusion to keep you asleep. You need to wake up to reality, right? And accept that everything is just power. And if you accept that, then generally that's going to lead you down the path to the only way to basically enact the political change you want is through violence. This is part of why I'm so disgusted with the people that are on both left and the right, the people that are cheering on the shooting of the CEO, because it's essentially giving into that concept.
Right. Yeah. Well, I see the different factions have different ideas for how society should be structured, and the checks and balances we have in society award people power based on the best, what people would perceive as the best way, whoever has the best plan for ordering society. So inevitably they get the power. So
okay.
Anyway, we can move on.
Most of the population of the United States have already moved on from wokeness. They hate it. But the institutions have just completely locked in on it. And so it's got this like zombie character where it's dead, but its body is still lumbering around eating brains. The universities will begin to reform when they realize that the product they're producing doesn't sell. I think what we're seeing is the death of an attempted cultural revolution. Is it done? No. Are there risks? Yes. But it's taken a blow, and maybe a mortal one.
So the institutions have been infused with wokeism. What does he mean there?
That wokeness is infiltrated a lot of these institutions, and the ideology has become the dominant one, either through force and coercion.
Is it authoritarianism?
Of like, oh, the DI initiatives, you have to go to the woke trainings, you have to adhere to all these things or you get fired, or through the institutions of like college education and stuff.
Yeah, I would say that the institutions have been taken over by representation and affirmative action, though, not authoritarianism. Like that's the meaning of what he is saying.
Yes, you're correct, but there's the element, the author, like, so I'm saying there's the behavior and then there's the ideology. The underpinning ideology is the far left communist authoritarian ideology,
Right. I
right?
just
And it's like, but there is also the element of it because this is like when people talk about this, you talk about like, oh, there's this wokeness, this authoritarianness, it's like overtaking my job. Like if someone says, oh, my job, it's become like hyper woke. Usually what they mean is there's only one ideology, one political ideology that's accepted in the job space. And if you voice something contradictory to that, like if you say, oh, I voted for Trump, right? Or, oh, I'm in favor of colorblindness or something, you're going to get in trouble. Whether that's either you're ostracized by everyone, you're going to get shittier job assignments, or you're going to eventually get fired. That's like, so there is definitely a very strong authoritarian element to it. Where under the liberal conception of liberalism, you could have a Democrat and a Republican work together at their job. And if their job is like, working at a factory or computer programming or something, it doesn't, who gives a shit who they vote for? It's irrelevant to their job.
I think that person is talking about affirmative action and representation. And the secondary thing is the authoritarian means with which they implement it.
But I don't think you can separate them because, like, think of it this way. Is there a job where there's a very strong DI initiative where merit gets kind of pushed away and things are, sort of on this race oppressed thing? We're going to promote people based on race.
Look,
but there's no element whatsoever of ideological coercion where if someone speaks out against this or is against, they're not going to get in trouble for it. Like, I feel like these things go hand in hand. I don't know if they could separate them.
This is why the liberalism example is so interesting, right? And I know that you don't like the liberalism example, but look, if they're strong arming some sort of ideology into the workplace that you're in favor of, all of a sudden you ignore the authoritarian aspect of it. You're like, oh yeah, I like this. They're like, we're going to make everyone work 2 days a week, whether you like it or not. It's like, oh, okay. Twist my arm.
No, okay.
And the woke people love these policies. So they're like, bring it on.
Wait.
They're not thinking of it from the authoritarian point of view. They're thinking this is great.
Is there a difference between saying are you not categorizing there a difference between someone saying, listen, Adam, you can be an atheist and you can work at the computer programming thing and you can believe whatever you want. And, Johnny, you can be Christian and you can work at the computer programming job and you both can believe whatever you want. That has nothing, your religious beliefs have nothing to do with computer programming. So the rule is, the law of the sword is you can both have your own religious, beliefs and you can work your job. Right. So that's scenario A.
Yeah.
Scenario B is the rule of the job is, no, Adam, you have to adopt Jesus as your savior in order to work here. And if you don't, you're fired. Okay.
Right.
And it sounds like you keep saying that these are the same thing. And I'm kind of sitting here confused as to how you could possibly conceive that.
Well, I'm just separating the means from the ends. Okay.
You're saying
like
that any enforcement of rules is the same, and I'm saying that I don't think that's a helpful or useful way to think of anything because everything is an enforcement of rules.
Okay, yeah. So you're just like I guess you're saying, well, what is so all rules are authoritarian? Is that the argument you're making?
No, it sounds like that's the argument that you're making.
To some extent, they are, yeah.
Okay, but if that's true-ish, right? Which it is sort of somewhat true. It becomes sort of like, it's like when someone on the left says everything is a social construct, and you're like, okay, that's like kind of true, but if everything is something, then it's not a useful way of conceptualizing it because it doesn't mean anything. Wait, hold on, and and I know, and everyone listening knows that when they say gender is a social construct, they don't mean it in that. They mean something specific. What they mean is I don't think there's any sort of biological root to this category of gender. So therefore, I in society should be able to change it willy nilly. That's what they actually mean. That's, we had the Mott and Bailey thing. And so then when you challenge them on it, they run away to their castle walls and they say, no, 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 everything's a social construct, right? That's the maneuver. And I'm saying, I don't think it's useful to sort of categorize any enforcement of any rules as automatically authoritarian, because you're basically setting up a very similar Mott and Bailey technique with this, where someone says, oh, they're really in favor of making sure that everyone adheres very strictly to their ideology. And when you challenge them, they're like, well, liberalism does the same thing. It's like, well, no, it doesn't, because there's definitely a difference between saying, oh, you must, in order to work here, you must accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, versus, well, you could believe whatever you want as long as you're not like punching someone in the face. Like thought crime versus a physical action, at least under liberalism, under our norms and values, we conceptualize as very different.
Under our rules, yeah.
Yes, under our rule system, yeah.
Okay, so let's set all of the authoritarianism aside and just look at like the example of the workplace that you lay out, right? There's a rule set that goes onto the workplace, right?
Right.
I guess we would define authoritarianism as like the zealousness that you enforce the rules.
Right.
Is that the way that you're thinking of it?
Authoritarianism is simply the zealousness of, no, I would, I mean, that's part of it, but I'll say, what are the rules?
Okay, so
right, because if you very zealously have the rule of don't kill anyone, I mean, I wouldn't say that that's not authoritarian.
So authoritarian is a component of the rule set. Look, you set up two workplaces. You've got a workplace where you have to be Christian to work, right? Maybe it's like a church or something. I don't know what it is. And then you've got a workplace where they will take anybody.
Well, let's use murder, because that's like an even easier. Like we have, like, using an extreme example is even easier. Okay, like if you work at a job and they say the rule is you can't murder anyone, right? Is that an authoritarian rule?
I'm just trying to make a very simple argument. Okay.
Okay.
Every workplace needs a set of rules. Do you disagree?
Of course.
Can you? Are these rules like I think you're arguing for the flexibility of the rules. Like that's an important aspect of it.
No, what?
Like different people have different ideas about how you structure a workplace.
Okay.
And those, I'm saying that the ideas that go into how you structure a workplace that's going to make that workplace more efficient, more productive, is more important than the tools that you use to enforce the rules that set that thing in motion. That are the rules that actually make the institution function. You lay out two different ways to structure a workplace.
Well, hold on. Let me just address what you just said. I don't know if I had 100%. I understand what you're saying. The ideology is more important than the implementation.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Right.
There you go.
That. Right. Sure. I understand that. I don't know if I 100% agree with that, because obviously you could have this is kind of not related to the woke conversation, but is just a concept. Obviously you could have the best ideology, and if you can't implement it, it doesn't matter. Right. So,
no, enforcement becomes part of the rule set at some point, right? Like you can have a rule set where, this is where the idea of the Gestapo comes from, right? How flexible are the rules, right? That does to some extent get incorporated into the rule set, but obviously I think the rule set is the base and the enforcement is the secondary factor. And with this whole woke conversation, everybody's saying, oh no, the enforcement mechanism is the primary factor. No, and we should just ignore the fucking ideology altogether.
So using the Gestapo as an example, it's kind of like, so the reason both the Nazis and the communists required Gestapo or secret police is because
everyone hated the rule set. Yes.
Yeah. Because the rules were so strict, right, that they required this very extensive, going into all of your life, secret police system to kind of enforce these strict rules. So you're correct. Like the ideology and the rules kind of merge together in terms of enforcement because they have to.
You have
Where
a more
under
popular ideology and people adopt it willingly.
it's not just a question of popularness. It's a question of like in America, you don't need the Gestapo on the level, the police are not operating as the Gestapo. Part of it is popularity,
It is
correct?
hilarious. Yeah, it is
But
popularity.
right, but part of it is not just popularity. Part of it is also that liberal societies are just so much more permissive of behavior that you don't need someone looking over your shoulder every 2 seconds to make sure you're not breaking the rules the way
Right.
you would in a Nazi society or a communist society.
Well, and look, in the back to the wokeness and the DEI as a synonym for wokeness, I think the reason why you're getting more and more of these authoritarian Gestapo tactics is because the ideology itself is unpopular.
Yeah. Well, yeah, sure. I don't disagree with that.
So look, if wokeness, if this DEI, look, there was a time when affirmative action and representation in movies and all that stuff was far more popular because people as a society all agreed that there was this racist undertone that we could all see with our own eyes, right? So they were like, we need to do something about that. Those policies were popular, but as people with their own eyes can see, okay, those racist undertones have really, we've made a lot of progress in dealing with them. They're like, now these policies seem unfair. So now the policies are unpopular, and the only way that you can implement them is through this authoritarian tactic. But we're still talking about like completely different things, and just that's my point, is that we're like, it's just cleaner to think of them as the ideology versus the enforcement mechanism. And maybe my constantly thinking of the morality stuff has made this is why this is a hill I'm prepared to die on.
So, well, okay. Well, I agree with you. Half of what you're saying in terms of the popularity is true in terms of like the example you kind of brought forward. But there's another half of it that has nothing to do with popularity, which is that under liberalism, the concept is, okay, there can be disagreement. It doesn't like the popularity of the ideology doesn't matter. Under liberalism, the philosophy says people can disagree on issues as long as they follow the law.
Yeah,
right?
that's part of the rule.
That's part of the rule. Yeah, there can be disagreement. And that's part of this is because liberalism values the individual. And part of it is because liberalism says, okay, we can exist in a society where not everything is power based. Things can be rule of law based. The rule of law can be blind or neutral to everyone, so people can be afforded equal protections under the law, even if they're in a minority status. But under like the woke leftist view of reality, they say that's a lie. There's no such thing as equality under the law. Everything's racism. Everything is classism. Everything is power. There's nothing else beyond power. And so disagreement is not permitted, partially because they're like, oh, all these people have been basically brainwashed into believing liberalism. And part of it is because they don't actually believe rule of law functions. And so it's not just, so even if you existed in a workplace where wokeness was the most popular thing, they would still not be permissive of someone deviating away from the ideology.
Yeah, but this is a component of the ideology. It
yes,
is.
exactly.
Like,
exactly,
and this is why incitement to violence in liberalism is illegal, right? Because we're saying people are allowed to disagree. That's a rule. We're going to put some teeth in it by enforcing it and saying, look, we're even going against freedom of speech in saying that we draw the line at being able to incite violence because people are allowed to disagree.
Right.
But still, we're talking about the ideology. As soon as we start talking about how we enforce this ideology, then we're in a different conversation.
The ideology, it's closer than I think you're giving credit to, or credence to, I should say, because, like Nazism is a perfect example. Nazism stands for National Socialism. And so you get into this big argument where people say, well, is Nazism on the left or the right? And all these people argue back and forth about whether it should be conceptualized or the left and the right. And then, we have this concept where it's like, okay, well, if you actually look at the roots of Nazism, it actually could have gone in either direction. It could have gone to the far left, or it could have gone to the far right. And then it was only depending on who seized power and they kind of moved it more. Hitler seizes power. I forget what the other people, the more left-wing people's names was. Dev knows their names. But you have Hitler comes into power in the Nazi movement, and he kind of pushes it to what we would consider to be the far right. And so if you have this movement that could have actually gone in either direction, it shows you that there is a lot of overlap that we're talking about ideologically, not just in the enforcement mechanism.
Between the left and the right. Look,
between the far fringe left and the far fringe right.
Right. Look, and I don't deny that there are similarities. My issue is that people are playing the cherry pick game where they're like going, oh, look at all these similarities, when you can pull out just as many differences. I'm like, so you're just basically ignoring all the differences. Like, I can play this game too, until you're going to do some comprehensive analysis, and you're going to look at every single attribute, every single data point, and add it up and go, oh, look, 25% similarities and 75% differences. Like, what are we even talking about here?
Yeah, no, but that is completely correct. And that's why, I've said whenever we have this conversation that a big part, if not the primary purpose of the labeling of woke right is to
a troll.
It's partially a troll, but it's really more to say it's a gatekeeping mechanism. It's to try to make the fringe right unappealing to the middle mainstream right, to say don't veer off the path to the fringe right because they're woke and you don't like woke. That's the point of it. That's like the primary purpose of it.
Right. Look, and my disagreement is just that inadvertently you're muddying the water between the ideology and the enforcement mechanism. Because I do think, obviously, these are dramatically different ideologies.
But why would that matter?
Dramatically different ways of looking at the world. Well, it doesn't matter to someone. Look, it doesn't matter if you're someone who's in the liberal camp, who's like, I want the rule set to be liberalism, so therefore any ideology outside of liberalism is identical to me.
Right.
But they aren't. They're very different ideologies.
Well, wait. So what? Wait a minute. If 95% of Americans who are Democrat or Republican are firmly in the liberalism camp, okay?
95%?
Yes. Are firmly in 95%, 90%, I don't know, whatever you want to categorize it, right? Are firmly in the camp of liberalism, right? Why does it, and as I've said, if the point of labeling the far dissident right, the anti-liberalism right as woke right, is mostly just to sort of try to keep people on the right from stepping off the pathway, going down that pathway, why does it matter? It is, you're correct. It is a smear used to prevent people from going down that pathway. So who cares if they all get labeled with a broad brush?
I would say the reason that it matters is the same, or is the reason why Jordan Peterson brought it up in the original debate. Because when you're dealing with different ideological opponents, you have to know your adversary, because you want, especially in the liberal frame of mind, where you're going to engage them on the battlefield of debate, right? Not actual combat. You want to be able to speak their language to some extent to be persuasive to them. So I think understanding the different ideologies on the playing field and being able to address them individually, I think is an asset. And an asset that I thought the entire like woke, or anti-woke, enlightened, liberal perspective was all about.
Yeah, but I don't see why these things are contradictory. You can label them as the woke right and still have the knowledge set to know what the differences are between, the far right and the far left.
Okay.
There's a bunch of different various flavors of far leftism, that I don't know all the very distinctions between the Marxists, the socialists, the left-wing anarchists. They all, there's like a million different like flavors of all this shit, but it's like, who cares, right?
Right. Well, if you're saying woke, you're saying illiberal. So you're like, the most defining feature of this ideology is that it's illiberal. That's just what it means to me in this whole
To me,
debate.
that's the most important, because, like, and I've said this from the beginning, part of my definition of wokeness is you're trying to wake up, ironically, you're trying to wake up the mainstream left and the Democrats from the fact that the woke people are not your allies, that they are actually advocating for something that is very extreme, is very antithetical to your belief system. That's the point of it. That's the point of me kind of framing it and fixating as the illiberalness as like the primary factor that I think is important. Not only is it true, but I think that's an important element of it, is to try to get.
I mean, I
people
kind of
not
think the
to-
racism is the primary factor, but
Yeah, but
I mean,
racism is
that's just
part of
me.
racism is definitionally illiberal, right? That's all that's included.
Well, I mean, it's just if you say illiberalism bothers me, nobody's going to think, oh, he doesn't like racism. They're going to be like, if you say, look, racism is evil, I'm saying something completely clear.
Right. Again, there's a difference between what is true and what is more persuasive, right? And as I've already said, I agree. If you say liberalism or illiberal, most people know what the fuck that means, and it requires further explanation. But, and that's fine. So if you want to say, okay, it's the racism, that's fine. But then again, you're also sort of giving more credence to the woke right narrative, because not everyone, but a lot of people on the quote woke right are hyper racist. The white nationalists, the groypers, I mean, the base of their philosophy is racism.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, totally.
Right. But so then they could, under that definition, you could call them woke right.
How so?
Because the basis of their philosophy is racism.
Right. And the woke philosophy basis is racism.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's why I'm saying, like, to me,
even though most people believe it's anti-racism, but
right, but we know that it's really just racism disguised as anti-racism.
Right.
And so that's why, to me, I'm like, I keep saying, I do understand the argument, and I do think there's a legitimate argument there there's a lot of overlap in not just the enforcement mechanism, but also in the ideology of the far left and the far right, which makes sense because it's like, when we talked about how the internet politics is going to be more extreme or fringe than mainstream politics, because if you're in the internet, if someone's watching internet politics, it's generally like, okay, they need to get something. They need to exist in a niche of commentary that they couldn't get from the mainstream. Because if they could get it from the mainstream, they would get it from the mainstream, right? And I think that's why the internet politics space is more, not everyone, obviously not us. There's not everyone. There's other people that aren't. But I think that's why, on average, there's more extreme, more kind of fringe views on the internet politics space. It's just the nature of the way that the platform is. It's the same thing of these ideologies. If the Overton window of acceptability is liberalism, then you're going to get basically every flavor on the left-right spectrum of individualism is going to be accepted in the mainstream conversation. And so that means, well, what are you going to get that's not accepted on the fringe? It's going to be collectivism. Well, there's going to be a lot of overlap between the left and the right collectivists. Now, it's not going to be exactly the same, because the left are going to want to collectivize according to class, and the right are going to want to collectivize according to religion or race or something, or ethnicity or something. But you're going to get a lot of overlap.
Yeah. I mean, I realize this criticism can be levied at the dialogue around the woke left, but the finger wagging mentality, I don't think is useful. And I think the woke right terminology is, I mean, you said gatekeeping. It is a little bit finger wagging. And obviously that's, it's I mean, there's been a little bit of finger wagging going on with the woke left as well.
Of course. Yeah. But right. And
so the criticism can be levied on both sides.
Right. And I mean, it's interesting. And I'm glad you brought the finger wagging, because part of the difficulty with this is the woke left are the ones that we perceive as the finger waggers. And that's what makes them be perceived as like cringe and not cool.
that is a great point. Yeah.
Right.
That is a great point.
Right. So you don't want to
we don't want to be the finger waggers. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Where you become the finger wagger against the quote woke right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So, but that's why I've always said to me, and I think that your criticism on this to me is the most important issue is if the term is not useful, if it just actually allows the fringe right and the mainstream right to galvanize together, then obviously it's a bad term because it's failing at its primary, utility or the purpose of it.
Right. Look, and I think I made myself much clearer on this stream as far as separating the means and the ends. The
yes, the enforcement
mechanism
versus the
the
ideology,
which is the important part to me, because
right.
It just, as an interested party, I mean, I'm interested in why people adopt these various ideologies. What is the reasoning behind them? Even if it's just their, innate moral intuitions, it's interesting. So I want to say, look, Lethal Strain super chatted $5 to say it's his 50th birthday today. So happy birthday, man.
Happy birthday, Lethal
That's
Strain.
a great milestone.
Look at that.
So glad you made it. Let's hope you make it to 100. I hope I make it to 100. So, and then there's a $20 super chat as well. It might be partial to the. Okay.
Malik for $20 says the difference between liberalism by the sword and authoritarianism by the sword is that in a liberal system, we decide where the sword is swung as a collective instead of having it dictated to us.
Well, and this goes to the popularity thing. It's like if people adopt a society, a set of rules for society willingly, then you don't need a lot of by the sword, right? That is the idea behind liberalism. So, but I like when you're talking about authoritarianism, it's like, what? That's like an empty vessel for an ideology in my view. Like authoritarianism, I just see as the enforcement mechanism for whatever ideology the authoritarian wants to implement.
Right. But Lethal Strain said something interesting in the chat I think I should address, because we actually talked about this off stream. Where was it?
Yeah, we did have a good, useful conversation off stream about this whole thing. So,
I can't find it, but it was essentially the concept of, oh, here it is. Can't we just go back to calling them crazy people and not worry about the party line? And yeah, that actually could be much more effective to just be like, I think that's part of why the griper label was effective, because like, oh, they're just gripers, right? So if you're on the right, you don't necessarily associate with them. I would guess that part of the thought process here that James is operating under, now this might not work. It could be completely wrong. But I think part of the thought process is he's like, okay, I've been trying to raise the alarm on the left in the past to wake up to the threat of, the socialists. And they basically didn't wake up to this at all, ironically. And they slept through it. And the socialists were able to stick their little hooks into the mainstream left and infiltrate all these institutions. And he's kind of seeing it like, okay, I'm now worried that the, whatever you want to call them, the post-liberal, the fascists, the whoever, are this threat that's seeming to grow on the right. And he's worried they're going to stick their hooks in the mainstream right, essentially. And so I think by calling it specifically the woke right, he's trying to wake up the mainstream right to become alerted to the threat that is being posed here.
I would call woke people the race-obsessed left. I would say woke basically defines people on the left that are obsessed with race. And I would say, look, there are people obviously on the right who are also obsessed with race, but I would say, look, I wouldn't call them woke because it would damage the work we've done on defining the race-obsessed left. But I would note that there are people on the right that are a problem that are also obsessed with race.
Right.
Like, we have a name for them. Ethno-nationalists.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that would be the most persuasive argument.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's difficult because like you have Tucker Carlson, who I think is a perfect example. Tucker Carlson, I don't believe is an ethno-nationalist, or if he is, he's not. Well, I think Tucker Carlson's probably a grifter, but
yeah, I do too.
Yeah. So he's not really like, he's like kind of like pushing elements of the sort of anti-liberal woke right. The America is bad. America is at fault for everything. Sort of poking questions at, the post-World War II liberal order, liberalism is bad, without getting strictly into ethno-nationalism. And so on one hand, I agree with you, ethno-nationalism is very clear, but if that's if that's like the line of demarcation, it's like, okay, well, you're going to let all this other anti-liberal ideology creep past that isn't explicitly ethno-nationally based.
Well, this is why Sitch is law is Sitch is law, because we're literally having an argument over the definition of a word, woke.
Yes.
Like, and you're saying, look, we should best conceptualize woke as being anything that's illiberal. And I don't think that that's the place it has in the mainstream
my argument is
media.
we should do whatever's effective. Okay, I don't give a shit if woke right is an ineffective term, then throw in the trash can. I'm not married to this term at all.
Right. Well, I'm saying, see what there was a time when wokeness was only in the main, or only an online phenomenon, right? That was a term only online people use, but wokeness did push through to the mainstream. I like, did social justice warrior SJW ever push through to the mainstream? Did they say SJW on Fox News? I don't think they did. Yeah,
woke did, but SJW
so
never
woke
did.
did, and I'm saying, look, this is a powerful tool here, and what I'm seeing happen, it's so fucking ironic too, is I see James Lindsay, I see Konstantin Kisin, I see these people doing the exact same thing that the left did with the word racism. They said, look, there's this word racism that has a lot of power in society. It's completely mainstream. And let's try to use that power to our advantage politically. And I'm like, I am one that thinks like the old definition of racism was far more useful. Like, why are we redefining the word just to win some political battle? So, but look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe everyone always thought woke meant this authoritarian, illiberal thing, when I always thought it meant, the race obsessed left, the identity obsessed left.
You're not, the issue is, and I keep saying, you're not wrong.
Right.
That, like, when you say like, oh, if you ask like, a bunch of people, what does it mean? What does it mean? They say, oh yeah, the race, people that are race obsessed on the left, people that are puritanical on the left, blah, 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 right? They might not know or understand all the underlying reasons for why they're race obsessed. That's why, as I said, I think most people define it by the behavior, not by the ideology.
Well, no,
they don't know what the ideology is. They just know the behavior.
They do know what the ideology is, though. That's the thing. They know what the ideology is. They know the ideology is, oh, everything is white supremacist. Everyone.
No. When I say they don't, no. When I say they don't know the ideology,
I mean trans people.
When I say they don't know the ideology, I mean they don't know that the ideology. They don't know the ins and outs of the ideology. They don't know it is an anti-liberal ideology.
No,
they don't know it's a Marxist ideology.
This is why. Look, you keep slipping into the authoritarian thing.
No, wait, no, stop. This has nothing to do with authoritarianism. Okay, they understand that those people believe that white supremacy is everywhere. They don't understand the lens and frame that they're looking at the world. They don't say, oh, they're looking at it from a Marxist perspective and they've just switched out class for race. They don't know that. They know that they're obsessed with race. They don't know why. Okay.
Yes. Look, and I don't think that's necessarily important, because they understand, like, this is a worldview. I keep saying this. This is the worldview. This is the ideology, right? This is a person who believes that all white people are inherently racist through some sort of systemic oppression. They believe men and the whole gender binary is oppressive. They believe men can be women. People can be gender fluid. All these are ideologies. This is all part of the worldview, right? When authoritarian comes in is when they say, look, this is our worldview, and you have to adapt. You have to adopt our worldview, because our worldview includes things like using pronouns. And if you don't use the proper pronouns, that's offensive to people, right? So they're basically using authoritarianism to enact an ideology. And people understand that ideology. When they say woke, they're thinking, this is the ideology. Here it is. I understand it. I don't like that ideology. Well, ideology is against my ideology, right?
Okay, I guess just what I'm trying to say is that there's a difference between people understanding that someone has a belief. They don't understand why they have the belief. They don't actually understand what the ideology is.
Why is that important?
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
I understand that, but
okay.
I don't think that's important to the conversation about, like, woke is a word that's in everybody's head now. What do they mean? What do they think of when they think of woke? I don't think they think of authoritarianism.
I don't agree with you, but okay.
Okay. Well,
Brian,
until we do some sort of like survey, I don't think we'll ever get the answer to that. But
Brian for $50 says you shouldn't look at the goals of either the far left or the far right. Both sides can frame their beliefs to say that it would mean a better world for all, and obviously we all disagree with them because we know that their means are abhorrent and wrong.
again, I mean, you're just pointing to a similarity. I mean, I thank you very much. That's a very generous super chat, obviously. So, yeah, I think I'm very consciously separating the ends, like the world that they want to see, their dream utopia, from how you go about implementing that utopia. Now, I agree with you, Sitch. I agree with Martin Luther King. I agree that the means are somewhat incorporated into the ends. Like we can't, we have to do it. And this is why the popularity thing is important, because it's just, we have to do it where a lot of society has an equal buy-in. So authoritarianism is a component here, but the ideology is the main factor for me when we're talking about this conversation.
Stock for $20, $22. Thank you so much. As one notable difference, I think, is the blank slate question. Progressives woke tend to believe the blank slate, and thus culture 100% shapes you. Post-liberals seem to also think culture 100% shapes you, but also basically that it's genetic or immutable, something like that.
I think a lot of these are post hoc reasoning to kind of justify this worldview that a lot of their social circles share, to kind of justify why this would be a better world for people. But I think the worldview is the interesting part, the important part.
Okay. Continue.
Okay.
Watching the video here.
To James, Lindsay, welcome back to Trigonometry.
Yeah, great to see you guys again.
Great to see you. Thanks for coming on. I think there's a very obvious question that has to be asked in the wake of the Trump, not just election, but the sweep that's happened in recent weeks. Is this the end of wokeness?
No, I mean, I wish I could say it is. In a way, I mean, I hate to be this way, right? It's a complicated subject because most of the population of the United States, but not necessarily other countries, have already moved on from wokeness. They hate it, but the institutions have just completely locked in on it. And so it's got this like zombie character where it's dead with its animating spirit is dead, but its body is still lumbering around eating brains. And so it's like a zombie ideology. And so in a sense, wokeness as a popular movement kind of already died. It became a liability, I think, for the Harris campaign and the Biden administration before that. And I think it's something we're all trying to move away from very quickly, except, like I said, our institutions aren't letting us. And now, so we have to look forward to a Trump administration that is not.
Now, is DEI synonymous with everything he's saying here? I feel like it is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just aware of the problem of wokeness, but Trump campaigned actively on dismantling that institutional power that they've achieved, at least within what he can reach within the government. That's not going to touch the state government of California. That's not going to touch local governments. That's not going to touch too much with the schools, at least not everywhere. All of these kind of public institutions, it's an open question as whether it'll affect the ESG environment that's leading the corporations to pick it up. The S is woke in ESG. Are the corporations going to change their tune? Are they kind of realizing, in my, by the way, experience with that, this is, I think, a turn of phrase that you guys will appreciate, that the stage has lost the room. So if you go to like these conventions, industry conventions, the stage is up there. We're going to be the most sustainable cruise ship line in the history of cruise ships. And the room is sitting there, and these are professionals, in the industry, sitting there saying, this isn't going to work. So
what's wrong with sustainability? I like sustainability. Elon Musk is on board with sustainability. I mean, Elon Musk is so invested in sustainability, he started an electric car company.
Right. But
what's bad about sustainability? Why is sustainability woke?
because what he's talking about is, the whole, I'm assuming what he's talking about is the whole sort of Klaus Schwabian concept of the only way to be sustainable is to, lower the population, have like strict authoritarian government control. Like, so yeah, I mean, it always depends on how you define, how you define that term. So
Right.
Oh, it's this weird zombie position now. And the left isn't going to let go of it. That's absolutely certain. They're already trying to figure out ways to double down. The primary explanation, at least in the immediate wake of Trump's election, has been that Latinos are now white supremacists. And they have one hammer. Everything's the same nail, right? Everybody's a white supremacist.
But those are the crazies, though, James. I mean, what I think we are seeing is...
See, he specifies white supremacy, so...
Yeah, I do agree.
He's talking about the hammer, then he's talking about authoritarianism.
Right. I do agree with Constantine here that it does seem like a lot of people on the left who have been basically either afraid or in the dark about what wokeness really was are finally growing a set of balls or become aware, and they are pushing back vocally and publicly for the first time.
Right. Yes. They agree. They agree on the race, but then all of a sudden they're like, what? The gender binary is oppressive? What the fuck are you talking about?
Right.
Is the more sensible people are now a little bit more courageous. Because
yes,
the center left has always thought wokeness was dumb. They just were too cowardly to say anything.
I think that's right.
And it's starting to feel like they are so desperate now, and that's what losing does, right? Is it pushes you to recognize that if you continue to stay quiet, you're going to continue to lose.
That's right.
See, and he categorizes it as a difference between the far left and the center left. It's totally obvious. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
That's right. And I think we're going to see a lot of that. We're going to see a lot of this kind of center-left intelligentsia trying to figure out how to walk back a lot of the messaging, how to distance itself from that, to pretend that they were never involved, to pretend that probably it was somebody else that did it rather than them. And so, yeah, woke. So back to the original question, woke has taken a big arrow with this election, I think, of Donald Trump and the movement that rose up around it. America, I think, very resoundingly said, no, we don't want to do this. We don't want the identity politics. We don't want the manipulation. We don't want everything on earth to be boiled down to white supremacy or transphobia. There are other causal explanations for things that don't go right in the world. And plus my shtick, like it's on my shirt, anti-communist, my shtick is to link this to communist programs, whether in Mao's China or in Lenin and Stalin's Russia or Soviet Union. And a lot of people recognize that now. I mean, one of the primary things, even Trump was saying it in his campaign, was that Kamala Harris is a Marxist. I think I played some role in bringing that to light, explaining her iconic, able to see what can be unburdened by what has been as being perfectly in line with Marx's 18th Premier to Louis Bonaparte.
I don't like this argument much. We've had this argument leveled at us by Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin, on liberalism, like the origin of liberalism. He basically made the argument that you're tied forever to the origin of liberalism, even though liberalism has morphed into something, I would argue, far more useful. So just because the origin of this is somewhat communist, I don't necessarily think that's driving it today.
Well, I mean, I haven't seen evidence that when Harris made that comment that she meant it in this framework that James is talking about.
Right.
I've not seen that. I mean, because I went back and the first example I thought I could find of it was just her giving it like a commencement speech for women, and she was just talking about the system of bigotry that once was against women or something.
Right.
I think was
the context.
Right. It was like, don't let the baggage of that hold you back from the future, which that's not really a communist statement. So I don't know if that's what Harris meant. Maybe she did, but I'd have to see evidence of it. But we can jump ahead here to the
let's do it.
So let's see. It's okay. About here.
Social media is like that.
And James, you mentioned the term woke right. It's a term you and I have both used. but it'd be interesting to talk about it for a number of reasons. But first of all, what do you mean by that term? Because a lot of people are very confused about it.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the best term. It's more accurate to I don't use the word woke too, I use it a little too casually still, generally speaking, but I've tried to be very specific when it comes to it, to use the phrase woke Marxism, as in that it's a species of Marxist thought, yada, yada, yada. So we can very easily place that on the Marxist left, right? Well, woke right, another term that might work for that is woke fascism. And just like woke Marxism is technically woke neo-Marxism, this could be called woke neo-fascism. The more syllables...
Why is it woke?
Well, that's what I wanted to get to. So there are kind of two ways to look at why it's woke. And one is kind of philosophical and one is practical. The practical side is look at how they behave. They behave exactly like the woke. There's the targeted influence campaigns. There's the manufacturing of what the postmodernists called legitimation by parology or whatever. They create the illusion that there's massive support for this and massive distaste for that, using social media manipulations like we just talked about. They are highly invested in identity politics. The answer for them to leftist identity politics is a reaction identity politics or reactionary identity politics, equal and opposite, or in biblical terms, answering evil with evil, which the Bible says not to do, by the way, very specifically. And so there's this, grievance identity. Everything's bad for white Christian men, straight white Christian men. We're the oppressed minority under this. There's an ideology, and this kind of bleeds into the philosophical idea, but we'll get more specific with that in a second. There's this kind of belief that there's this ruling class that's erected an ideology to marginalize people like them that sounds very much like woke, except instead of saying that it's like the white people the white ruling class created white supremacy to marginalize people of color, especially black and indigenous, and their ways of knowing from getting inside, the woke right or the woke fascist side says instead that following World War II, on the back of Hitler and the idea of never again, there was erected a post-war liberal consensus. Starting in the 1940s, immediately, starting in 1945, the creation of the United Nations was part of this. The signing on to the United Nations was part of this. They assigned Bill Buckley, to having done a route to drive the true conservatives to the margins so that a false post-war liberal consensus conservative movement could rise up, the neocons, and hold them out. So the neocons become this kind of hegemonic force within the conservative faction that edges out so-called true conservatism and these more dangerous, so to speak, ideas like fascist ideas, like Carl Schmitt's ideas about unbound executives and friend-enemy politics and so on, that these ideas all had to be pushed to the side on the pretext that World War II or a Adolf Hitler can never rise again. And so therefore, the true conservatives who represented conservative politics and kept at bay the beast of the left, which they say is that the right's true function is to keep at bay the left. In other words, to have a war, right versus left, with everybody in the middle, I guess, taking fire in the crossfire. But they believe that this post-war liberal consensus and the neoconservative movement literally was designed to marginalize their perspectives and to keep these other more radical right-wing ideas out of play. So this is a very woke way of thinking about the world, that there was a structural construction of the social and political and cultural environment designed to exclude people like them in order to be able to achieve certain political agendas. And now they believe that they've woken up to these ideas.
Okay, so without getting into whether you think it's good to call them woke or not, so put that on the back burner. Does anything that he's described here, do you disagree with it or do you agree with it?
No, I agree with everything he's saying. Like, I completely understand what he's doing, but I conceptualize it completely differently because I'm starting with the ideology. I'm saying this person has a worldview, an ideology, a way that they want to structure society. And then they're going to search for arguments that are going to be persuasive to adopting that ideology. They're going to search for different power bases that they can grab onto to adopt that ideology. So in everything that James Lindsay is describing is them looking for persuasive arguments that are going to work, them looking for power bases that they can grab onto. And I agree with all that. Yes, of course they're going to use all of that stuff. We've been saying it from the beginning, right? Any weapon that comes out in the culture war is eventually going to be used by the other side, right? Cancel culture. So we say, be careful what you wish for, because your enemy is going to use that against you. So he's just describing that process, which is fine. But look, I think it's more effective to look at the ideology. Like, why did these people desire this sort of way of structuring society and fighting the ideology, not the weapons that they're using?
The why is, well, I mean, because that, I don't know if that's a good framework either, because there's going to be a lot of overlap. Because like the why could be, I don't have a girlfriend. I feel alienated by society. I don't have a job, right? And so, I mean, you could be in the far left or far right for, you have that, if that's your why, right? That's not like a distinctive categorization.
Right, exactly. But
yeah.
But then you're talking about a whole different solution. Like he's talking about the rules. And look, I know why this appeals to liberals. I know why this appeals to a lot of people in our audience, because it's like,
when you say liberals, what do you mean? Do you mean people on the left, or do you mean people that subscribe to liberalism?
People who subscribe to liberalism. Okay. I guess they say small L liberalism.
Right. Just want to be clear.
I'm talking people, libertarians, liberals, people who want to maximize individual rights and freedoms, right? They're saying that's why they are keenly aware to the authoritarian aspect of all of these ideologies, right? They're like, this person has a worldview that they want me to adopt, and they're going to, they're going to use argumentation, and some of them are going to use force, which is what really triggers a lot of liberals and libertarians, right? And a lot of liberals and libertarians think, look, I have an ideology that is like live and let live, and everyone will have their own personal individual ideology. Like, this is why I argue with so many of them about morality. They're like, look, I have a personal morality. This is why they're offended when I say, well, morality is really a group phenomenon. They're like, no, I'm an individual. I don't I don't subscribe to this group phenomenon, even though obviously this live and let live mentality, it's a rule. That's a part of a group phenomenon, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, but look, I realize the appeal here, and I understand why it's very easy, and why the argument that I'm making may seem very complicated to a lot of people, because the similarities are vast. I don't deny that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. But just when you're saying liberals, I mean, that when you say that, I'm in my mind and saying, okay, that includes like 80% of Republicans, right? Because they would also agree with that.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just to be clear.
But a lot, obviously the language gets muddled now, because a lot of people on the right think liberal means socialist or
I know. So maybe it'd just be better to just say like Americans,
or maybe even just libertarian, because libertarian seems to be the word most
there's
people
a bunch
understand for
but there's a lot of Republicans who are not libertarian strictly. But
what was your word?
American.
Oh, yeah, that's confusing too.
I don't think that's confusing.
So, someone who wants to expand, who wants to preserve individual rights is what I'm talking about. Well, no,
right, but that's it's okay. Inherent in American culture is liberalism. And America might be one of the few countries, if not the only country in the entire world, that from its sort of like founding doctrine principle had liberalism baked into it from the beginning. And so because of that, culturally, Americans are probably the most
totally agree.
Rah,
freedom loving. Yeah, exactly.
So that's what I'm saying. To me, it actually would be better to just say Americans. Most Americans are in favor of, are sensitive to any sort of authoritarianism. It doesn't matter if they're on the baked or the right, because it's kind of baked into our culture.
Look, if you want to conceptualize woke as like race
anti-American.
Well, no, I think like race obsessed, I think you're on firmer ground if you want to start making the woke right argument, because it works cleanly, and I don't think it damages any work that has been done. But at the same time, I just think it's more persuasive if you say the woke is the race obsessed left, and there's a different problem on the right with race obsession. But there are other problems too, like the gender, the gender binary, like completely wanting to destroy the gender binary or the sex-based binary.
Right.
That's a completely different problem, separate from race.
Right. I wasn't making myself clear. I should have explained this from the beginning. The reason that when you were saying the word liberal, that was like sticking out to me, is because one of the critiques I've seen very commonly repeated against Lindsay and Constantine is
that they're liberals. Yeah.
These people are disaffected liberals. And when someone says a disaffected liberal, they don't mean little L liberalism. They mean a disaffected left-wing Democrat. That's what they mean.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to avoid that confusion when you use the word liberal, to say, okay, well, do you mean that, or do you mean broadly liberalism? So that's what I was saying. If you mean broadly liberalism, maybe it's better for us just to use the term America, because that is the predominant ideology of America.
Well, we're in our environment here on our live streams, we can just articulate ourselves ad nauseum. So it's a lot. Right. It's a lot cleaner. I think if you went to Twitter and started using obviously people would be completely confused by that.
Right.
So,
right.
But I do. Yeah. Look, I'm an independent. I call myself an independent now. So, and I think independent, it sort of signals that you're an individualist, right? I mean, that's part of it being. This is why I like the term independent, right? It's kind of baked in there. So, but yeah, look, I get it. I see why. And this term is like what James Lindsay is doing, and why I think he continues to do it is I think it is appealing to a lot of people. I don't think it's persuasive, and I mean, we'll see what happens. But I mean, like I said, I'm kind of done. I think the woke has like run its course.
Yes, right.
Now it's mainstream. So, and I think everyone knows what they're talking about. Hopefully, this is the end of. Hopefully, Trump will make a dent in the race-obsessed left, and we can get back to a more meritocratic workplace. Yeah,
that'd be nice.
Woke. They've found them again. They've read the forbidden philosophers, Carl Schmitt, Julius Evola, James Burnham, and so on. They've read these things, and they're bringing back a true conservatism that was excluded from politics roughly since the end of World War II on the bogus pretense of preventing the rise of another fascist like Hitler or Franco or Pinochet. And so there's a very practical explanation for why they're woke, but especially their behavior. Lots of lying, lots of character attacks, lots of saying no enemies to the right, but they don't actually even attack the left that's their enemy, so to speak, at all. They only attack other conservatives. Lots of power plays, lots of manipulative, speech. And then there's the philosophical, deeper aspect. Why woke? What does woke mean? Woke up to a structural politics that marginalizes people like me. And we need to band together in solidarity, no enemies to the right, in order to be able to create a powerful enough oppressed coalition to flip over the power structure by putting ourselves at the center and claiming power for ourselves.
This is just, it's just a persuasive argument. They're like, that's a great fucking sales pitch they got over there on the left. How do we use that sales pitch to promote our product?
Right.
It's like, look, sex sales, right? But you can sell hamburgers, cars. Are hamburgers and cars the same? Fuck no. They're completely different.
No, but it's interesting that, because kind of like the people that are against that, they label it all the same. They say, oh, you're just, using the objectification of women, right? So they're saying it's the same process, even if it's being used to sell different entities or objects.
Right. Yeah, no, look. Yeah. We're pattern recognition machines. Like we can. But this is the game. Look for the similarities. Everyone's like, you can't, Adam, don't you see the similarities? Look at all these similarities. And I'm like, yeah, I see those similarities. But I'm not willing to ignore the glaring differences. But look, you understand this in all aspects of life, right? That's part of our psychology as human beings. We are great at overlooking the differences when they're right in front of our faces. You have to go out of your way to find the differences. This is why science is based on disconfirmation, because nobody wants to disconfirm their deeply held beliefs, right?
This is explicitly woke, having a critical consciousness about the way the world is organized. Tucker Carlson, for example, if you listen to Tucker, a lot of people really like Tucker. Tucker is pretty critical of America. He's not doing a Howard Zinn critical America theory. Howard Zinn being the one who wrote the People's History, so the Marxist history of the United States, propaganda. He's writing a different critical history of the United States. Well, the Constitution was, not really adequate to prevent all of this. There is a post-World War II liberal consensus or world order that we're all being made subject to. Well, look at how America was involved in all of these things. America bad, America bad, America bad. Also, the UK was pretty bad too, and America bad, America bad. There's this kind of constant critical negativity. You see some of these characters, I mentioned Tucker Carlson, but you see some of these characters like Stephen Wolfe, who wrote the book The Case for Christian Nationalism, has put multiple times on social media, and I don't know.
See, look, and there's an answer for this too. Obviously, if you have a super niche ideology that is never going to gain popular support in a democratic system, you are going to hate that fucking democratic system. So they have completely different ideologies. They're night and day, but they both know that those ideologies are unpopular. And in a popular system like liberalism, a system where popularity is an important metric, they're always going to lose. So they're just incentivized to hate America.
Yeah, right. And the issue is kind of like that he's talking about with Tucker is, and I think he talks about it in his Michael Malice conversation, that part of the technique, and the left or the woke left did this with racism, is that they're going to draw a wedge issue, and they could believe something for a radical or extreme or far reason. And if you attack them for that, they retreat to the moderate reason that maybe moderates agree with them in order to say, look, you're just attacking moderates, right? To try to gain people. So like this, we saw this a lot with CRT is a good example where,
oh yeah,
we attack CRT and you're like, oh my God, like CRT is essentially an ideology that is anti-colorblind, anti-liberalism, is pro-ethno-nationalism. That's what race consciousness means. It means to be pro-ethno-nationalistic.
Yeah.
And
black nationalism.
Right, specifically black nationalism. And, we point that out, and then the CRT people, they retreat. Some of them, they don't know better. Some of them, they do know better and they're being dishonest. They retreat to the position of, well, no. This is just about talking about, racism in America. You want to destroy, you want to make it so you can't talk about racism. You want to make it so you can talk about the history of racism, right? We saw this repeatedly.
You want to whitewash history and forget about slavery and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And the point of that is to get moderate lefties on their side to act as essentially human shields for their radical ideology. Right. And
totally.
Right. And the problem is that now we see a lot of that. I mean, to a lesser extent, but you see a lot of that happening on the right.
Yeah.
And I see Tucker is kind of engaged in a lot of behavior. The very classic example, or very good example of that, is the whole Russia-Ukraine situation, because there's a completely non-far right, moderate reason for why you maybe don't want to be involved with Russia and Ukraine. And it could be A, you just don't want you're afraid of nuclear war and you don't want to die. That's completely fair enough, right?
Yeah.
Even if I disagree with the logic there, it's an understandable belief system.
You think we should help Americans first?
Yeah, or B, I don't want to spend my money, I don't want to use my money, my taxpayer money on Russia, on Ukrainians. I would prefer my money be helping Americans first, right?
Yeah, totally.
Right. So you have these two reasons that are completely, even if I disagree with them, are completely fair, completely logical, completely within the bounds of liberalism and being a moderate, person, right? And a lot of people that are anti-involvement in Ukraine, those are the two reasons of why. Okay. But then there's a third reason. Okay. And this is what the extremists, they don't give a shit about those first two reasons. they don't want to help Ukraine because they view America as bad. They view America as this force, this massive cultural force that has spread liberalism, that's little L liberalism,
By
all
force?
across
Oh my God.
the globe, okay, all across the globe, and is kind of doing this post World War II liberal order of, you know, making sure that every country is a Western liberal democratic capitalist country. And they view that like Russia and China are, you know,
Resisting.
two large countries that are resisting the liberal order.
Yep.
Okay.
Totally.
And so
The
they
liberal
want to support,
ideology.
right. And so this is why like Fuentes and those people, they want to support Russia because Russia's pushing back against liberalism. It has nothing to do with any of those two other issues. It's
I
because they
love
want
this.
to push back against liberalism.
I fucking
Okay.
love this stuff because it's like they frame the Russia and China as the freedom fighters.
I know,
right?
which is ridiculous. Right.
I know.
It's totally insane. Right. So
But there is an irony to it because
is,
obviously
there
we're
is.
spreading, we're the freedom fighters,
Right.
spreading freedom by force.
Right. And they're advocating for an ideology. It's, you know, it's interesting they say that because they're kind of casting Russia and China as the freedom fighters, and yet their exact criticism of liberalism is that it's too focused on freedom, and freedom is bad.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they framing them as freedom fighters should show you that intuitively, no, that means freedom is good. You're intuitively setting them
I
up
know.
as like,
It's
yeah, I know,
so
it's very
beautiful.
interesting.
It's so beautiful.
Right. There's a delicious irony there. But so the problem or the difficulty then with dealing with this issue is that it's like the exact same thing with CRT. You can point to CRT and say, oh, this person is, you know, they're trying to advocate for this thing for their own nefarious purposes. And they say, no, I just want to get rid of racism. Right. And then a bunch of meat shields jump in front of them and say, yeah, we have to defend this person. It's just for racism. It's the same thing with the Russia stuff, where someone could be on Russia's side because they're just anti-liberalism and you attack them for it, and they'll lie and they'll say, well, I just want to spend money on Americans, America first.
Yep.
And then all the people that have more legitimate reasons for not being involved in Ukraine will jump in front of that person and defend them. And that's how I see Tucker Carlson. Well, for him, it's hard because I don't know if he's legitimate or not, whether he actually believes it or he's just playing this character. He is playing the character of sort of bridging the mainstream and the far right, anti-liberal right together. And he's kind of doing this whole dance with Russia. And this is part of why you have him literally going out there and doing propaganda for Putin. This is part of, you know, where he's going in the, you know, he's doing the interviews, he's giving them a softball interviews, he's trying to set them up for these easy questions. He does the shopping cart, you know, the grocery store propaganda. Or when you have Tucker going out and saying that he was attacked by a fucking demon while he was sleeping,
Oh my God.
you know, doing like the ridiculous LARP, which is insane. Or he has I forget the guy, the Martyr Maid guy on his show, who expresses the exact position of the evil post World War II liberal consensus about how, well, you know, was Hitler really the main chief antagonist, or was it, you know, Winston Churchill? You know, he was the real chief antagonist of World War II.
Right.
You know, maybe the Nazis wouldn't have been so bad if only England and the other European countries were not, you know, attacking them, right? This kind of like insane historical revisionist process. So
I think I just realized why we talked in the very beginning about liberalism, you know, there being, well, you could categorize it as a somewhat authoritarian enforcement of liberalism, which is kind of a contradiction, and a contradiction that the right is constantly pointing out. I think one of the reasons why that doesn't bother me as much as it bothers you, and bothers other people, obviously, is that I do think it is kind of a little bit of like a yin yang troll on the right, because they constantly are saying, look, you're an authoritarian. You're the one spreading liberalism by force, right?
mm-hmm.
So when I just admit, oh yeah, we're totally fucking spreading freedom by force, even though I know there's this popularity component that they're completely ignoring. It's just, it's them basically abandoning their own ideology because they want to spread their ideology by force. That's like a key component to their ideology.
Right.
So I'm like, what's wrong with force? You guys like force, right?
Right. Right. Well, it's kind of like
You respect force.
There's two elements. One of it is it's kind of like when someone who's not Christian says, "Let me use Christian doctrine to attack a Christian."
Yes,
And if you're
totally.
a Christian,
Same
you're kind of like
thing.
annoyed because you're like, "Well, you don't even believe this. Like, fuck you, right?"
Totally.
Right. So that's part of it. And then, but the second part of it is that again, there is a difference because it's like spreading liberalism by force would be, you could say like George W. Bush, right, going in and trying to
Of
knock over
course.
governments and force them to be liberal. But that's
You
very
can't do
different
it that
than
way. Yeah.
right, which doesn't work. That's
Nope.
very different than just being like, oh, liberalism is so popular that people basically adopt it when they have the freedom to do so.
When they have the opportunity. Yeah. That's why
Right,
you can
like-
only be the cavalry. You can only be the cavalry.
Right. And so that's why kind of the framing on Ukraine has been the way it is, because Ukraine is a classic example of a country that has been adopting more and more liberalism over the years, trying to move closer and closer to Europe over the years from its own free will, from its own choice. The people are voting for this again and again and again, right? And then Russia's like, no, we don't want you, to move in that direction. And so the people who are sort of for whatever reason, are more on the Russia defense side, they concoct a narrative, a false narrative that, well, no, you forced liberalism on them. You forced all this stuff on them through conspiracy, right? Through mental manipulation, through magic, essentially.
That's why they compare it to Iraq, where we did fucking force liberalism on them. And how did that work for us?
It didn't work. Right.
It didn't work at all. Fucking massive failure. Yeah.
Right.
That's why, look, the Ukraine situation is completely different. So
yeah.
But we gotta be like a pickpocket or a safecracker. You gotta get in there where you have the opportunity, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Know what he said in public talks. I've only heard one of his public talks, but you see him on social media saying more than once that he has adopted critical theory specifically for his own purposes and to his own ends. He was recently saying on social media, somebody sent it to me, so I have to, I guess, confirm this, but he was saying that, in fact, the critical theory he uses is not the perverted version of critical theory that the left has used. It's its own more correct version of critique that goes back before the left, yada, yada. And so how do you not call...
Who is he talking about? Who's adopted?
Richard Wolff.
Oh, really?
This Christian nationalist guy.
Oh, his name is Richard Wolff? You're kidding me.
I'm sorry, it's
I'm like,
something
Richard Wolff is the Marxist guy,
not
right?
the...
I'm like,
I don't
he
know,
loves...
something.
Okay, so
Yeah.
some Christian nationalist is saying he adopted critical theory.
Right.
Which, I mean, that just plays into my exact understanding that, look, it's a useful tool. Like this, there's a lot of people out there, a lot of minds out there that we're trying to win. What would be an effective advertising campaign against them? Oh, we're being oppressed. They just know. They know the reality of the situation.
Stephen Wolf.
It doesn't change the fact that they're selling completely different ideologies. One of them is selling cars and one of them is selling hamburgers. So,
well, I get, like, I don't know. On one hand, I disagree with you. On the other hand, I don't care. So I don't even know if I keep fighting you on this. I would say it's not like one's selling cars and one's selling hamburgers. Like one's selling a car and one's selling a truck. Like they're both vehicles. They're similar enough, right? They're different, but they're similar enough.
I really abolishing the sex-based binary and like an ethno-nationalist state those are similar? I just look what a multicultural moral relativist society versus a strict theocratic Christian society. Those are similar. That's like a truck versus a car. I don't.
Yes. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
So if you have the far left is saying, hey, we need to A, get rid of individualism, and B, adopt collectivism. And we got to adopt collectivism around class, right? That's the classical Marxist conception. We need to adopt collectivism around class. We need to all be unified and say there's no difference between us as long as we're all just on the same kind of class level, right? We're all in it together on the basis of class. Okay. And then you have the far right, and I should be more clear, the specific elements of the far right, because obviously the far right has a bunch of different coalitions that might say something like, listen, we need to get rid of individualism. We need to adopt collectivism. We need to all be unified around
Race. Yeah.
race or
Yeah.
ethnicity specifically,
Yeah.
right? We'll all be equal and under the eyes of the law if we're all the same ethnic group, right?
You're so good at this. You're so good at this because you can instantly pull out like the persuasive similarity.
Thank
So
you. Thank you.
look,
But no,
but
but this,
I think my example points out the persuasive differences. So it is an interesting debate. It really is.
right.
So I guess it's like what are those tests that are it's like the rabbit duck thing. Like
Well,
I can't
mhm.
help but see the fucking rabbit and you can't help but see the duck.
No,
So
I see both, but I see
well, you look,
why.
I see both
Yes.
too, but I'm
We
just
both see
saying
both. We're just saying
the
which is it more,
important
rabbit or
thing
duck?
is the
Yes.
rabbit. Yeah.
Right.
That's a debate we're having. You're saying the
Yes.
important thing is the duck. I'm saying the important thing is the rabbit.
I mean, I'm saying
Yeah.
I see the similarities. I'm saying I don't really care how to categorize it. I'm really more concerned about the persuasive element, but I do see the similarities.
Yeah.
Right. But you see the similarities too.
Dude,
So you you
why?
understand like how people can see them or categorize them as the same.
I don't the reasons. I guess the thing that is persuasive for you is just I'm saying the framing is unpersuasive for the goal that you want to achieve. That's persuasive to you. I don't know.
Yes.
I would have to think for a while to come up with other reasons why it's better, why it's more useful to see the rabbit over the duck.
Well,
I
in
don't
a
necessarily
strict,
know.
and like if this is a strict, like we're in a vacuum and we're a bunch of academics waking off in academia, and we're completely detached from the real world and we're just trying to categorize things, then like, yeah, it's probably more useful to be like as hyper specific in categorizing things as possible. Right. But even then, I would still say, it's kind of like in the animal kingdom, you have like the kingdom, genus, phylum, species, blah. You have always like different like branching categories, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like the way I think I would view it is I would view like socialism and fascism or neo-socialism, neo-fascism. They'd have like a similar, like they'd have the similar, I don't remember like the whole kingdom shit, but like they'd have a similar family or genus or whatever. And then they'd branch down and be like very separate. They'd be separate from each other, like on the next level, if that makes sense.
Right. I think I can think of one way that it is more useful to categorize it your way, and that is in arranging people to police the rules of liberalism, to entice people to police the rules of liberalism,
which is I think what Lindsay's like his goal is.
Yeah. Which, and I obviously everything is trade-offs. I don't know if that's a useful trade-off, but I do see that is happening. And I do think we should be policing the rules of liberalism to some extent. Like when I make the argument that the Supreme Court is good for saying, my friends on the other side, civility politics is kind of an argument for policing the rules of liberalism.
Yes,
which
100%.
I'm in favor of. The whole conversation about, people jumping for joy about some CEO being murdered in the street is kind of people trying to police the rules of liberalism. Which we said we weren't going to continue to use that. So, look, maybe, do you want to keep going? Maybe we should move on to Super Chats.
Sure, we can do that. Or we can watch, we should watch a little bit of the Michael Malice.
Okay, I am curious. I mean, I like Michael Malice, and we won't watch the intro because I think you have a timestamp.
No, I have a timestamp. It's just a little bit of it. So,
and
they talk about a lot of other stuff.
But Michael Malice in the very beginning of it does say, like, he kind of makes a nod to the fact that this isn't very persuasive. Like he says, Michael Malice says he respects James Lindsay's point of view and he wanted to invite him on at the end of the year because he likes to invite on people that he doesn't necessarily disagree with, but thinks they have good, sound arguments. And then he saw James Lindsay fighting with everyone who Michael Malice likes on Twitter and how painful it is to see personalities and thinkers that he likes arguing. So,
Right.
but I mean, I guess it's not necessarily just arguing, but it's arguing like in a kind of
Well, it's
weird way.
difficult because, again, and this is why I made the tweet that I made. When I see people attacking James Lindsay, I don't know necessarily, is it because those are they are the post-liberal, anti-liberal woke right that he's talking about. B, because they are like mainstream right people and they think they're getting hit with strays, or they could think, and they could be right about this, that the creation of the term woke right will allow the left to attack them anyway. Because and this is another element, I don't know if James has ever talked about this, and I wouldn't be surprised if Christopher Rufo or someone maybe DM James about this, or one of these people, is part of why there could be a lot of anger and hesitancy to adopt the label or the moniker of woke right is the left is trying to do the Uno reverse card. We've been seeing this a lot with sort of the reaction to Harris's loss, where they say, oh, it's the right that's obsessed with identity. It's the right, the right that's obsessed with gender. It's the right that's obsessed with all these things, blah, 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 blah.
It's a great
And
point.
so if the term woke right becomes popular, it could very well actually become a very powerful weapon that not the mainstream right uses against the far right, but that the left just uses broadly against the right overall. It says, no, you're the woke ones. You're the ones obsessed with identity. And so that is a key issue of maybe why the label woke right isn't a bad one.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's devastating. So.
But I think it sounds like this.
No.
What?
What happened with the watch together? It did
I switched the video.
Yeah, but it did the thing.
What's the thing?
YouTube video cannot be played directly and watched together. That thing.
What? Really? Wait.
The thing that it occasionally does. It came up for like a millisecond. Oh no, I guess okay. Perfect. I don't know why it did that.
Yeah, weird.
We're good.
So yeah, but I feel like it sounds like James is sort of like warming up to the idea, like he acknowledges that maybe this is not a good term and that there needs to be something different. So
he's been persuaded.
Right.
Look, a lot of people because I was tweeting about this and I stopped because I was like, I don't want to be. You laid out the 3 factions that are attacking James Lindsay, and I guess I'm in one of those factions, but just because I don't think it's useful or persuasive. But I understand he's being like 2 of those factions I completely disagree with, and I don't necessarily want to be a part of those factions. So,
well, that's why, and that's sort of the difficulty of all this is like
who's who? Yeah.
Who's who? Exactly. Right. Because when even in my tweet where I was just kind of laying out the various factions, there was a lot of, and it's so annoying. And I don't know if James says it in this conversation or a different one, where like the people that are like in the Groyper specifically because the monarchists don't usually engage in this behavior to my experience, but the Groypers engage in this behavior. I've never seen, they lie more than any group of people I've ever seen in my life on the internet. They just lie. And well, there'll be 2. There's like the Groypers who are just so in your face, like they fucking hate Jews and everyone knows it. They hate women and Jews, and we all know it, right? It's so clear. And then there's like the group that just tries to pretend like they don't hate Jews, and they try to like trick you into thinking it's something else. And they just lie like as easy as fucking breathing. And so that's why it can be very difficult to sort of figure out like who exactly is attacking people for what reasons.
Yeah. So demoralizing.
Well, that's part of the goal, is to demoralize you.
Yeah. All right, then it's not demoralizing.
Bulls, and I don't have the slightest idea what it actually refers to, and so you're just going to have to nod and, give thumbs up and do your best to figure out what he wants. And so it's just how it is. So anyway, woke means having awakened, awake. This is, let's not complicate the matter here. Woke means having awakened.
That's so ironic. If you listen to James Lindsay's podcast, look, he's the avatar of complicating the matter. What's he talking about?
Right.
You can't say that, James.
to a view of reality that is based on structural oppression, and in particular that oppresses people like me to the exploitative benefit of people like them.
Right.
That's all woke means. Reality is the left woke calls it critical consciousness. You now have a critical consciousness of how the world is organized, but it's an oppressor versus oppressive dynamic. And that the belief is that the world, in fact, everything in the world, it's a metaphysical worldview. It is not, it's not like some beliefs. It is when it's all the way there, it's not that everybody gets the whole thing or knows that they're in it. It's a full-blown lens for how you view and interpret reality around you.
Can I say something? Because there's something I think conservatives don't get. Because conservatives are like, why do you keep talking about race? It's like, that's like saying, why do you keep talking about the Constitution? It is literally the basis for your worldview. There's nowhere else to go. Everything has to be viewed through the, like you said, lens. And in some sense, it's a form of Gnosticism. That's right. Form of hidden knowledge that once you are initiated into the mysteries, you realize everyone else is asleep, right? Or clueless. It's their version of being red-pilled.
That's right. That's exactly right. And everybody else has false consciousness or they're asleep or whatever. Yeah. So woke means having woke up to the true structure of reality. And it's actually structured by systems of power that generate oppression. And it's always this kind of like victim mentality is built right in. So it's in identity politics. So it's people like me who are oppressed, unless you have like the white guilt thing. And then it's like people like those poor victims are oppressed, with the empathy stick. And so woke means that. It doesn't mean left. And it doesn't mean necessarily believes in Marxist stuff. It doesn't necessarily mean that you care too much about race, although that's often implicated as part of the structural beliefs about reality. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that you're pro-trans. It means that you believe that there is a oppressor-based structure to social reality that colors your entire interpretation of reality. Then you could add.
So this just like he's completely lost me here, especially when he starts dialing out all of the things that describe what mainstream people believe woke means. So it's just he's stripping out all of the details that I think just mainstream people would completely disagree. So look, and you can say that the oppressor-oppressed lens leads people to believe different things. But I mean, when he starts saying like a woke person is not a person who thinks we need to abolish the gender binary, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? There's like 1 billion videos on YouTube of people calling someone who wants to dispense with the gender binary woke.
Right.
Yeah. So that's just completely just off the charts wrong.
Add one further thing, because the woke actually do believe there's a duty of conscience that comes with this. The belief about oppression is that oppression is a dynamic. It's not that there's oppressor and oppressed as two separate things. They are two poles in a dynamic of oppression. So oppression creates an oppressed that's being done by an oppressor. So they're intrinsically linked. And the belief, at least from Marxism, from page, 2, I guess, of the Communist Manifesto, the main body of it, is explicitly that this is the engine. This is what it actually means for history to move. The entirety of human history is the history of the antagonism of classes. And
there's also a problem with this analysis is that there are situations where people are literally oppressed. So the oppressor-oppressed dynamic is useful in those terms. The argument over wokeness is this one of those situations? And I would say woke people are, like I said, overstating the problem. They're saying that this is oppressive when really most people think, well, that's just a normal part of life. That's not oppression.
And so the oppressor versus oppressed is actually there in that first paragraph. So woke means that you woke up to this. Okay, fine. Well, what does woke right mean? Well, we often think of it as woke left. I've been actually being much more precise for a couple of years and saying woke Marxism to describe what I'm talking about on the left, because I think it is derived from Marxism. Woke right is kind of this.
Wait, isn't it explicitly derived from Marxism? The Foucault and all them, they were explicitly taken from Marxism.
I think so. People
they're
argue.
pretty explicit about it.
They are quite explicit about it.
okay.
And neo-Marxists were trying to revive Marxism that wasn't taking hold in the West. The postmodernists had kind of given up on classical Marxist analysis, but wanted to do a new Marxist-style power analysis, analysis of power, and its manifestation through the more subtle aspects of life, like language and the structure of language and so on, as post-structuralism. And so, yes, it's derived from Marxism. So woke right are the basic definition is going to be people who act like the woke, although this is a very weak definition. People who act like the woke, same tactics, same victim mentality, same identity politics, same poor me, same, kind of very instrumental use of language, very instrumental use of knowledge, of concepts, of lies that means justify the end. So lying and smearing and canceling and struggle sessions are all on the table in order to gain ideological growth or consensus, but also to gain, obviously, power. And so, but that do so using so-called right-wing traditionalist values. Now, this error has been made in history, and it's extremely well documented by some of the people who made this error, because I think it is an error to pick up, so to speak, the ring of power here, to say, well, what the left is doing is working, so I'm going to do that too, even though it's plainly evil. And that error is most thoroughly documented by a very proud German man named Adolf Hitler, who wrote repeatedly that he did this. Mein Kampf talks about it. He says repeatedly that he's the one who's actually going to execute Marxism, and he's going to get rid of the parts that don't work, but he's going to execute Marxism. So in other words, woke
execute
right,
meaning put into practice, not kill.
Correct.
Okay, just to be clear.
Well, probably both, honestly.
Well, both.
But
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But yes, put into practice. And so in truth, woke right is like a piss you off slang term, and they're going to probably clip that and run with it but it is. That's part of the point, is if Sun Tzu said, if your enemy is of choleric temper, irritate him, And so woke right is like a piss you off slang term that means neo-fascist, where the neo here plays the same way as neo plays a neo-Marxist. It's a new theory. It's not the old, early 20th century stuff, but it's this same reaction that, and this is how you can summarize that reaction very simply. Communism basically puts out this sales pitch. There's this oppressor versus oppressed dynamic. The oppression is evil. We're the only people who understand it. So we should get in power and have all the control, and we'll end it. And fascism is a reaction that says, actually, the communists believe this and they're right. Reality is structured that way. There is oppression, but that's what held society together. So we need to do more of it.
Okay.
And so the woke right are people who, in some measure or another, have bought into this. Now, they choose different locuses for the power structure. Some of them have this very kind of intellectual concept called the post-war or post-World War II liberal consensus. Some of them just stick it in Israel. Some of them expand on that and say that it's the Jews, and that's spelled Joos, Jews, the Jews. And
Jews with a Z.
Well, it can end in a Z. That depends on how flippant we're being. But these lock together, right? They're interlocked, because the post-war liberal consensus in the very respectable side's telling, and I don't think most of these guys do much anti-Semitism, and they're telling, part of the post-war liberal consensus was, we're going to prevent the rise of fascism. We're also going to prevent the rise of Hitler. We will not have another Holocaust. And therefore, we also have to build Israel as a safe haven for the Jews. They may not jump in and say, and it's an ethno state and that's terrible, blah, blah, blah. They have other purposes with it. So there's this interlocking aspect between these kind of different factional beliefs, sort of like CRT and queer theory are not commensurate, but interlocking beliefs through intersectionality. And, the intersectional faction became the solution to those infights between the various leftist groups. We're not to the synthesis part of that fight, I think, with this neo-fascist woke right movement. But neo-fascist would be a more, respectable, calm, let's not piss people off just to piss them off term for it. But it's not meant to be confusing. And for me, it was confusing that people were confused, because I'm very clear in my definition of woke.
Okay.
The word that I don't think fits is right. I don't think these people are on the right because they run a leftist operating system, a leftist metaphysical worldview, but they're doing it in the name of, traditional values. Where Marx said in the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, he says, all the revolutions of history draw their inspiration from kind of a romanticized past. But for him, the difference is that Marxism draws its inspiration from a romanticized future.
Right.
These guys are the characters that he's talking about. They're the old Hegelian, transformers of history, but transforming it into a rigid hierarchical structure of what they think they already have.
Okay, so I think that's where we can stop it. So, but that is kind of interesting because I don't know if James is on the side of saying that like the Nazis should be considered left wing instead of right wing, because he said that kind of interesting thing is like, well, the woke label to him makes sense. It's necessarily calling them the right doesn't make sense, because he's like, well, they're not really on the right. So they're woke, but should they be on the right? Isn't, another question. I think you get into like a stickiness or a more confusing nature if you try to say they're not on the right, because when you talk to any of these sort of neo-fascist, post-liberal, I think I'm going to start calling them the anti-American right. You start speaking to the anti-American right. If you ask those people, do you consider yourself on the left or right? They almost all consider themselves on the right. So it'd be weird if we're like, well, you're not, even though you all consider yourselves on the right.
Yeah, that's a good distinction right there. Anti-American right. That's a good way to look at it, and a good like metric to look at. Does Michael Malice respond to that? Can we listen to it a little?
We can. I don't think he really does.
Let's see.
You underappreciate to what extent human beings see things not through a true false filter, but through an us-them filter.
Yeah. No, that's totally.
Woke is them, and right is, broadly speaking, from their perspective, us. Even the bad parts of the right. Your term is what's it called? Something self-contradictory, like military intelligence.
Self-contradictory.
Yeah. What's the paradox? Not paradox. What's the word I'm thinking of?
Oxymoron.
Oxymoron. It's an oxymoron. That shows how stupid you are, because everyone knows woke means left and we're right. So how could they be that? So that's how they reason. It's just simple as that.
Well, that's where we get into the conspiracy theory side, because maybe this isn't even all that organic. Maybe it's paid for by the same people, like with World War II, where the fascists and the communists were paid.
Well, so I mean, I agree with everything Michael said, that there is the us versus them mentality, and people, they're going to view right as us and left as them. And so, yeah, they're just going to automatically turn their brain off to whatever you're saying. So,
yeah. I think people, obviously, they have everyone has a definition of woke in their head.
Right.
That this challenges that definition. So,
yeah. But then the part of it goes back to are the Nazis on the right conversation. So many people just are so allergic to wanting to say yes. I understand that on the spectrum, if you keep going further on the spectrum that I'm on, it's going to go to a bad place, right?
Right.
It's going to go in the bad place. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's true of everything in life. The dosage makes the medicine. That's something
totally.
You need to drill in your head. The dosage makes the medicine. And this gets kind of confused because, when we talked about Reagan the other day, part of Reagan's success was that he aligned three factions in America. He aligned the business class, he aligned the libertarians, and he aligned the religious right. And he aligned them all together in the Republican Party. And so the libertarians kind of come in, and unfortunately, like, they kind of fuck up the entire conversation, because for the last 40 years, libertarians have conceptualized themselves as mostly being on the right. And they're like, well, what do you mean? The more extreme version of libertarianism can't be Nazism definitionally, because it'd be like, some kind of Ancapistan, right? It's like, okay, like, libertarians, you have to understand you're like your own thing. You're magical creatures. You're on your third axis somewhere, okay? Don't confuse the conversation. So,
right.
Anyway.
All right, cool. I think this is a great conversation. So I can't wait to read your guys' comments, your guys' feedback. So, but let's do some super chats.
Matrix 07012 for 200 says, I think there's a grain of truth to post-World War II consensus in that a bit after World War II, culture has become hypersensitive to right-wing thought. Every conservative-sounding idea was fascist. Every research in the human genes, eugenics, etc. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't categorize that as a consensus. I would just say that's whenever someone goes, like, it's why you see like a lot of the European countries that were once Soviet countries are like so vehemently anything that gets labeled as socialism, right? It's because they experienced it, right? Or
Of
and then they
course,
fought
yeah,
against it.
it's tangible for them.
Right. And so in America, because we viewed ourselves as the big heroes defeating the fascist Nazis, very cleanly, and it becomes part of our hero mythology or hero mythologizing of America, then yes, you're correct. Then anything that kind of smacks of fascism or racism, we become very hypersensitive to. And this also because after World War II, a lot of the pushback against racism generally in America was tying in segregation and racism to Nazism specifically, saying, okay, well, if you're in favor of segregation, if you're a racist, you're like a Nazi. So, Dr. Fire for 20 Canadian, thank you. Says leftist activities destroyed terms like Nazi, racism, even far right by crying wolf far too many times. So it seems to me they are now trying to undermine terms like woke because of how caustic the term is to their cause. That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Everyone knows. Woke has gone mainstream and it's bad.
Right. Very original for 5 Canadian says, have you guys read any of James Lindsay's books? I'm listening to the Marxification of Education and it's really interesting and quite scary.
I've listened to a bunch of his podcasts, but I don't think any of his books are on Audible. So
I read Cynical Theories.
Oh, I guess I did read Cynical Theories. Yeah, that's with Helen Pluckrose. That one is on Audible. So
right. And it's funny because my dad actually read Cynical Theories and he's like, this is everything you're telling me. I'm like, you're right.
That's awesome.
But I haven't read the other ones. So Radically Milquetoast for 13 months. Thank you so much. Says Sitch, congratulations on surviving Thanksgiving between S-Class and House G Squad. Have fun celebrating Christmas as it's the better winter holiday. Thank you.
Look at that.
Sammy is convinced that she's going to Christmasify me yet. So
that's great. That's great.
M8566 for $5 says, quote, it's just like Stalin back in Russia time. Sitch, you should know who said this, of course. The myth, the legend, the proto SJW, Britta Perry from Community. Sweet. That show was ahead of its time, unfortunately.
What do you mean, fortunately?
No, unfortunately, because like if Community came out a few years later, so it came out like when Wokeness started to come into being,
it would have snuffed it out.
It will. I don't know if it was snuffed out, but everyone would have had that like you're the worst, Britta. That would have been the ultimate insult against woke people or SJWs back in the day.
Right.
It's been like, you're the worst, Britta, because it was such a clear, hilarious characterization or caricature of like the woke mind virus in a person in that show. Amoeba Sheep for 1 month says, recently revisited Adam's Moral Foundations video. We often sing praises for Sitch videos and lament their loss, rightly so, but props to you, Adam.
Yeah, Jonathan Haidt reached out to me after I made that video and asked to put it on his Moral Foundations website, which was really cool. So you can see it there on the internet as well.
It's a great video. The Real Haltonator for 4 months says, Sitch, I totally agree with your point, but with your example of everything as a social construct is not good. The laws of physics is not a social construct. So again, it gets into like the definitional game, because when they say everything is a social construct, they don't mean that the laws of physics, like if you drop something, it's going to fall down, is a social construct. What they mean is you categorizing things and using language to denote categories are a social construct. So, for example, like it's biologically true that, mammals all share this, characteristics. That's just a truth of nature. But they'll say it's a social construct to say, well, we're going to choose to group animals according to those similarities and call them mammals, right? So that's what they say is a social construct. That's how you get the sort of ridiculous, the Vosh
Yeah, I know.
conversation about, was water a social construct?
Right.
Other people call it agua. There's this kind of conflation and, obscuring of like the term, like what the thing is and the term that denotes what the thing is. So,
This is why so many of these commies are linguists.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's so much of it's just linguistical games. D528 for $5 says, Adam, as a Catholic, I'm humbled that you as an atheist are far more charitable than I tend to be. Is it your nature? Did your Christian upbringing influence it?
My Christian upbringing definitely influenced it. I went through a period where I was a total Jesus freak, where I was just, I tried to embody being humble. Yeah. Humility. Wow. And I think humility is so undervalued in our culture these days. Like so much conflict is propagated because you got a society of fucking narcissists.
True.
It's like
very true.
Yeah. I always used to say, like, you know why Los Angeles is so spread out? It's because of all the fucking egos. It's like
it pushes everyone away.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, look, I try to be humble, and that's a great compliment for you noticing. Thanks. So I try to embody that for other people too. And look, if you're arguing like this makes you a better thinker. Like if you're not willing to look at long held beliefs that you've had and say, what if I've been wrong about this whole time? Like that requires a level of humility that's important. It is super important. Like look at the transformation that I'm so stoked that we've been kind of involved with Anna Kasparian. Like you have to be completely humble to be able to do what she's doing. So, I mean, to be on the internet for like 10 years and say all these things and just think maybe I'm wrong about this. Like that takes a lot of guts and a lot of humility. So I think it's completely undervalued, and I think people should strive towards being more humble.
True. I think it's interesting. I didn't know that I don't think you've ever said that before, that you were like a time that you were like really big into Jesus.
Jesus freak.
Yeah.
I know. There was a time when I thought, look, I'm going to be a religious artist. Like I could have gone down the Jonathan Peugeot route, which is interesting. Yeah. But I don't know. I have such a curious mind that after a while, I just like, I did the humble thing, right? I said, what if I'm wrong about this?
Right. So. Amoeba Sheep for 50 knock says, woke isn't the ends, it's the means. The ends are indicated by the party. Woke is the means of achieving the political ends, thus woke left versus woke right.
Well, that's why I spent so much time delineating that. So you can think clearly. Like if you do think it is the means, then look, you're on James Lindsay's side of the argument. If you think it's the ends, then you're on my side of the argument. So but look, and we can argue all day, right? I guess what matters is where we go from here as a society, because sooner or later, it's a lot of times you can't talk about popularity because people bring up the ad populum fallacy. But look, popularity is a part of how our society is structured. I mean, democracy is about popularity. So it is important.
Fondue for $2 says, what are people waking up to with the term woke? They're waking up to the idea that liberalism sucks. That's what they're waking up to.
Right.
A Libertarian Sasquatch for $2 says, this debate proves why woke right is dumb. I mean, you could be correct. It's obviously, if the term is too confusing or too contentious, then yeah, to the people you're trying to convince, then it doesn't work. So,
well, I think we talked about it in great detail, which I think it is helpful, because I don't necessarily know a lot of people are, they have their gut intuition about it, and they don't necessarily see what the other side is thinking or trying to articulate.
Right. Dan Snyder for $2 says, why is Sitch confident the shooter won't be acquitted? It's just obviously just my gut. I don't have a crystal ball. It's hard for me to imagine that someone who, the example the other day that was brought was OJ, where OJ, like, it's very hard, in my opinion, for people to just straight up be like, this person murdered someone, but I think it's justified, so I'm just gonna let them go. Like, it's hard for me to imagine that, like, the entire jury full of people are gonna stand with that notion where you have the guy on camera essentially doing the action. With OJ, there's enough ambiguity they could kind of like lie to themselves and say, well, maybe he didn't do it. Maybe, maybe the evidence was planted on him, right? This one, there is no ambiguity. I mean, the guy we have on camera, a guy doing it, you have on camera of the same guy, wearing the same outfit in a different, so you can see his face. When he was caught, he had, the gun on him, he had the manifesto on him and all this other stuff, and he has, the motive, he has all, you look at his social media, it's all right there. It's interesting because now supposedly it seems like he is going to try to do the OJ defense, where there seems like they're saying, like, the shooter is going to say, oh, they planted the gun on me, they planted the manifest on me. But none of that's probably, I don't think it's going to work, because like with OJ, you could say it worked because there's this whole narrative about it where it's like, oh, he's a successful black man who was dating a white woman. And if you're racist, then that would bother you, right? A black man being successful and dating a white woman and then ultimately killing her. With him, there isn't really a pre-established narrative that you could slot him. Like, why would this one individual kid, why would like the government or the police frame this kid? Like, it doesn't even actually make any sense. He's white, Italian. Supposedly he comes from like a wealthy family. Supposedly he comes from a politically connected family. I had heard someone say this, I don't know if it was true because I didn't look at it myself, but they claim that actually this, like, the CEO who was killed actually like came from a lower income working class family and worked his way up, and the kid that shot him is like from a very rich family. And so all the people that are like the socialists that are all cheering this on have it like completely ass backwards in terms of like who each class, who each actor comes from a class perspective. So that's why I don't think that sort of that technique that it worked for OJ would work for this guy.
Yeah, you nailed it on the ambiguity thing. But it's interesting to think because a lot of the OJ stuff, people didn't really perceive there being any ambiguity in that either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he was running from the police. Like, how,
Right.
if you're innocent, why the hell are you
but
doing
you could
the
say
freeway chase and stuff like
right.
that? So,
but you could say that slots into the narrative of, well, he knows that America's racist or the police are racist, and so they're going to frame him.
yes, yeah. But a lot of my response is a lot of that ambiguity in the OJ trial was dragged in after the fact, and
Yes, that's true.
I'm curious to see. Obviously, like, you don't see his face on the footage or any of that stuff.
Right.
Like, how much ambiguity can be dragged in here? Like, the thing that you're worried about is a clear case of jury nullification, where the jury is just like,
Right.
fuck the law, I'll decide whatever I want.
Right.
And in the OJ case, I mean, you can make arguments that that is an example of jury nullification. The ambiguity helps you make arguments that it's not. How
Mhm.
much ambiguity are they going to drag into this case? If it does go down the OJ Simpson route, oh my God. Oh my
Right.
God.
Yeah.
So
I'm skeptical. I mean, listen, I could be wrong. But I am very skeptical that it's going to go down that OJ route.
Well, look,
at all.
I remember OJ, and like, I was skeptical it was going to go down the OJ route either.
Right.
So I just am like,
yeah, but even like as soon as, I mean, I was like 5 or 4. I know I was
look,
very young when all this happened.
You don't remember OJ at all,
Right, but
no.
when I've watched documentaries about it afterwards, the sense that they always kind of give is that, and maybe this is not true, but they always give at the time that when OJ was arrested, there was already this very stark black-white divide about whether people thought OJ was guilty or innocent, like from the beginning.
Yeah,
part of it
but
also
look,
was
they've
OJ
done,
was like a beloved actor and sports star too. He was a celebrity. I mean, this kid's just some rando.
of course, and but a lot of the black-white divide, like, a lot of black people would openly say, "Oh yeah, he's totally guilty as sin," but white people get away with it all the time, and this is our chance
Really?
to,
Okay, right.
yeah, for a rich
I mean, that's pretty
person to get
fucking
away with it.
crazy if that's
No, that's what the
attitudes,
people would
but-
openly say. This shit.
Right.
People still openly say this shit.
Right.
So, I mean,
we'll see.
Yeah.
You could, it's very possible. What I'd say would be more likely is it's very possible that you could get a hung jury because you're going to have people try to obviously sneak onto the jury who are like socialist.
Oh yeah, they're
Who
going to
are gonna
lie. They're
try-
totally going to lie. They're going to say, "Look,
Right.
this guy needs to go away for 1,000,000 years," and as soon as they get on the fucking jury,
Right.
they're going to be like, "Oh, I think he's innocent."
Right. But my guess would be if that happens, they'll just. I think they're going to just retry this guy forever until they get either a not guilty or a guilty verdict. I don't think they're going to just go, oh, hung jury, we can't decide,
Yeah.
let him go. I don't see that happening. PI for $5 says, if you want to see woke right, look up the old Glory Club. You guys can get some good breakdowns. These guys want Trump to be king and thousands on stream. Ew. Wow.
Wow.
Okay. I never even heard of him, but I'll check it out. Sounds pretty cringe.
I was reading Marty McCary's new book, and man, it's good. It's totally good. And it's like, it's infuriating seeing articles going after him as nomination for the FDA. Like, the left should be fucking cheering that this guy was nominated for the FDA.
Right.
For head of the FDA. Yeah. And Lighthizer, I found an article that Lighthizer got shut out. I guess Lighthizer was trying to strong arm his way into Secretary of State, and Trump snubbed him. So now he's not even in the administration at all. And Lighthizer was the one that did all of Trump's tariff policies in his first term. So a lot of the people, and look, if you're MAGA and you're hoping for draining the swamp second term, the people he's brought in on the tariff stuff are super Wall Street pro-business friendly Republicans, swamp creatures, as you might call them. So
yeah, there was actually a tweet or was an article or something I saw that was like, or was that the one that you sent me? Where
the one about Lighthizer. Yeah.
Yeah, the he's not gonna. It doesn't seem like he's gonna be in the administration. So,
which, look, we listened to an interview or some podcast with Trump, and Trump was going on and on and on about how everybody wants to be Secretary of State. Like that's the position, the high status position that all these people want to be slotted into, right? And it just, when I read that article, I was thinking, oh my God, that's what Lighthizer was doing. Because Lighthizer was saying, Lighthizer basically said, there's only 2 jobs I want to have. Which, I mean, that is, why do you do that? Then you're basically saying, look, give me what I want or fuck you. And it's just, why would you say that to Trump? What is Trump's, if you go to Trump and say, give me what I want or fuck you, what is Trump going to say?
He's going to say, fuck you. Obviously.
He's going to say, fuck you.
Yeah, he's not going to react to that. Yeah.
So, whatever.
Brian for $15 says the strength of liberalism is that you don't need the majority to do as you please. If you want to live in a socialist commune, then you can, but under socialism, you cannot live as you please. You are forced by the majority to live and think a certain way. That's why I don't think we should say liberalism is living under the sword. That's a very good way of saying it. Yeah, I agree with that completely.
The thing is, though, and look, this is where the popularity thing comes in. Look, and I'm a firm believer in democracy. I think most people are happy under this system, and the reason why it works is because you need a light touch. You just need a light touch because people want to live under it willingly, right? But the people we're talking about on the far left and the far right, they don't want to live under it. They fucking hate it. And I think you should acknowledge the fact that they're fucking distressed by it. They fucking hate it. They hate it. Like, why are they doing the shit that they do, Sitch? Because they fucking hate it. They think there's too much freedom. They look at this chick getting plowed by 100 dudes. Now she wants to get plowed by 1,000 dudes. And they're morally repulsed by it, right?
Right, yeah.
So look, those people feel oppressed. It's the reality of the situation. So the whole idea behind liberalism is we're going to minimize the number of people who feel that way, right? And just isn't that the fair thing to do? Is it not the fair thing to do?
Yes.
Okay, so it is the fair thing to do, but I just think
I don't know. I wasn't really listening to what you were saying.
I think acknowledging the fact that there are people that feel that way, it's just, look, it's helpful. It's better to go to them and say, look, I know how you feel, okay?
Right.
But it's just, this is the way it's going to be. But it is funnier if they have the mindset of like, I want you to adopt my moral perspective and I'm going to force you to. Because it is like a bit of the yappy dog situation, especially when you're like, well, that's never going to happen in a democratic, liberal, capitalist society because everyone's against you. People are too happy with freedom.
True. RBGH fan for $5 says Mott and Bailey or Spider-Man meme. Point at Carlson, Owens, Carl, and Smith. When you get called out, pretend to only be talking about Spencer and Fuentes. True. Ocracy for $5 says based Adam finally actually hard defining woke as left wing. Thank you, Adam.
Yes. Yeah. No problem.
Lethal Train for $5 says woke is trauma farming against perceived injustice. Oh, that's definitely part of it. So
yeah.
It's definitely part of it. God's Joke, thanks so much for the $20, says, I heard a JQer say there's no way the Jews ended up being so overrepresented in media and government without some sort of evil plot. This is literally the left's complaint about black people in jail. Woke right sounds accurate. I mean, that is one of the similarities. Yeah, that's one of the big similarities. So,
yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's just that particular thing is a complete contradiction to their ideology because they also believe that there are, certain traits that they would say are innate. Obviously, I don't believe that in certain racial populations, right? And those people should be able will succeed. Some populations, some racial makeups, some racial populations will be better at certain things and worse at other things. Well, if you really believe that, then doesn't it just make sense that the Jewish people have a winning culture?
Or winning genetics, if you believe that, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, look, you're the one that's in contradiction when you say, oh, Jewish people are cheating.
Right.
But cultures can be superior because they have a superior rule set.
I've heard two ways in which they try to work around what you're saying.
Oh, interesting.
The first is that they'll say, well, the Jews are cheating because like white people have their hands tied behind their back because they can't participate in identity politics, but the Jews can. You hear that a lot. And then the second one is they'll try to say, well, it's not that the Jews are smarter, like inherently biologically, but they have some sort of like low moral character of manipulative skill biologically, where white people, even if they're just as smart biologically, they have more like positive moral traits like honor and integrity. So they wouldn't necessarily engage in those behaviors. So those are kind of the two.
Yeah, I don't know if I buy either of those.
No, obviously they're both stupid, but that's the excuses they give. Gene Payment for 26 months. Thanks so much. Says horseshoe theory, the theory that if you go far enough left or right, you end up in Tar Town over an open grave asking, are we the baddies? Very true.
Yeah.
Stock for $2 says, how about freaky authoritarian gobblites? I like that.
I do. That's a perfect description.
Or I guess it should be Gerbilites, right? That's how you say Goebbels.
Cool. Is it Goebbels? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Goebbels?
Goebbelites. So I think I might start going with the anti-American right.
Yeah, that is good. Like it says what it is. I'm a big fan of things that say what it is.
Right.
Anti-American right. Yes.
Paul for $5 or for $7 says, so if liberalism does not take in Ukraine in the long term, you admit that you were wrong all along, just like Iraq talking past the sell on Ukraine. Wait, what? I don't understand the super chat.
So if liberalism does not take in Ukraine in the long term, you will admit that you were wrong all along, just like
Iraq.
Iraq.
you're saying like if theoretically Ukraine was left to its own devices and devolved into what, authoritarianism or something, that would be that I was wrong, and that would be like Iraq. Is that what the question is?
Well, I think the situation is going to play out. There's going to be they're going to give up some territory, and the people who are in the territory that is given up are going to be fucked, and the
Right.
Ukrainian people are going to move more western,
Right. So it seems
more
very
towards the
unlikely.
west.
Yeah.
But it's the same standoff that we had in World War II with East Berlin, right?
Mhm.
And look, the same standoff that we have in Korea, like North Korea, South Korea, North Vietnam, South Vietnam,
China,
where
Taiwan. Yeah, I know.
yeah, so
These
where the
demarcations. Yes.
yeah, where the socialists take over, right? It's a fucking
Right.
shit show. Nobody likes it. Nobody does anything. They're like, why should I work hard? Like the state can just come in and take everything from me. What's the point of
Mhm.
building a business or and the only people who have businesses are people that the state came in and like gifted them something. Like you have a monopoly on flour or books, right?
Right.
So it's a shitty system. And the people in Ukraine will start liking the individual rights. And look, I think we will be proven right over the long term. And if we're not proven right over the long term, it's probably because there's going to be some influence scam going on
Right. Right. I think
from Russia. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no, to address what Paul said, I don't think it's just it's not comparable for the reasons I said it wasn't comparable the first time, which you didn't really address, which is that in Iraq and in Afghanistan, it wasn't like there was not a group of people, a faction of people who are like, we're trying to create a liberal democratic country. That wasn't a faction. And that obviously wasn't the government of the country at all. We basically came in there, got rid of the authoritarian dictator, and said, okay, now you're going to live according to this principles, when they didn't really have a grounding or a culture in those principles in the first place. Ukraine
Yeah.
is completely different because that's the government. The government is a liberal democratic government and has been for 20 years, even though obviously they have issues with corruption. It still was based around the framework of liberal democracy, and those people chose overwhelmingly in majority to live according to liberal democracy. So that seems completely not comparable whatsoever to Iraq. So the question of like, well, I don't know if in 50, if Ukraine gets taken over by Russia and, falls, I mean, does that prove that it's like Iraq? Obviously not. Right. So I don't think the comparison makes sense at all to me.
We'll see. We'll see what happens.
RBGH fan for $5 says, is spreading liberalism different than imperialism for economic gain?
It is, in the fact that
Mhm.
like traditionally imperialism was about subjugating the native population for economic gain in back home,
for their detriment to your gain.
Yeah, which I like. That is a zero-sum game, where I do think spreading liberalism is less of a zero-sum game. We're saying, look, your life will improve and our lives will improve as well. So that's the difference, I would say. What do you got?
No, I'd agree with that. And obviously, because I don't think spreading liberalism through the sword really works effectively. Where imperialism, you spread it primarily through the sword, or just 100% through taking over, a country or an area and saying, okay, this is ours now.
Yeah, I do. Look, there is. I'm always curious. There is a model that will form where governments and countries will ask for some sort of outside force to come in and build institutions.
They might,
It's
but that's
weird.
not imperialism.
No.
That's basically outsourcing, privatizing some element of like development in your country.
Yeah, but a lot of the left's anti-colonialists, getting their hackles up over what colonialism once was, is like preventing some sort of market-based colonialism to evolve, because if anybody comes in, they're like, oh, you're subjugating the people. They just their hackles are up about that. So, but yeah, I yeah. Anyway,
Tal Gore for $5 says the woke right does exist. It's things like lady ballers. It's a media term. I don't agree. I wouldn't say it's a media term. I think it's the things that we've been talking about this whole time. But Chachi McSwag for $10 says James isn't saying, quote, people who want to trans the kids away aren't woke. He's saying wokeness is a worldview, not a set of policies, i.e., someone adjudicating morality exclusively based on race or gender. Yeah, I think we both understand. That's what he's saying. So I think just Adam just disagrees with that framing. So
I guess I'm separating like the how to structure society, and these two are sort of interlinked, right? You have an idea of how the world functions, and then you want to structure society in a way that you think is amicable to that reality. So I mean, those are aspects of a worldview that I just think are distinct from the enforcement mechanism of whatever it is you pick as your way to structure reality.
Paul Ferjara says dosage makes the medicine except for liberalism. I don't know what you mean by that. I mean, you could have too much individualism completely. Like if your society becomes too individualistic, it can't function. So I guess I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, no, he's basically making the case that like the woman that everyone's losing their minds over, the one who slept with like 100 guys in a day or something, is liberalism gone too far, individual freedom gone too far. He's saying like that's when the medicine is becoming the poison. But I look, society collectively decides and makes rules around.
Well, no, wait. Okay. Dev tweeted about this, and I almost replied, and it really annoys the fuck out of me. Everyone knows this, and yet it always gets lost in these conversations. Everyone understands the difference between morality and legality. Okay, everyone knows this because everyone knows it's immoral to cheat on someone, even if it's legal to do so. You are legally allowed to cheat on your significant other, and yet everyone knows it's immoral to do something, to do that action, right? So we all know that there are immoral actions that we all say you shouldn't do that. That's immoral, but it's totally legal to do that. Everyone understands that. And so we get to the whole like woman, sleeping with 100, people. And most people go, oh, that's disgusting, right? They go, that's disgusting. But then it kind of gets bogged down in this conversation of like, well, just because something's disgusting, does that necessarily make it immoral? Should it be immoral because it's disgusting? Does it even matter? And the problem is that 9 times out of 10, when you're having this conversation with someone on the internet, where they're pointing to the woman having sex with 100 people, and they're trying to point to that being bad, they're almost exclusively doing it and trying to make the behavior illegal. And so that's why some of those conversations break down into the, well, under liberalism framework, the person's free to do it because they're talking about legal. They're not talking about moral. Almost everyone would agree, like, yeah, you shouldn't do that. That's not a good behavior to agree. If you're talking to them in a non-legal framework, in a vacuum. Okay.
Yeah, obviously.
No.
But laws come into play when society pretty much has overwhelming consensus that something is immoral, like murder.
It's more than that.
We'll make it illegal.
Everyone agrees. 99.9% of the population agrees that cheating on someone is immoral.
Right, but there was a time when it was illegal too.
Right.
Because society had almost overwhelming 100% consensus that this is immoral. So therefore,
I understand that, but we still have the same amount of consensus that it is an immoral action.
Of course we do.
And yet it's legal. So there's obviously we have a complete distinction between not everything that we as a culture view as immoral will necessarily be illegal.
Right. Yeah.
And so we
harder in a liberal society to get overwhelming 100% consensus. So that's why a lot of things move from being illegal to being in the immoral.
Right.
Like you were saying, like pretty much everyone agrees that getting railed by 100 guys in one day is immoral. And I was thinking, do they? Like, I mean, I think it's immoral, but
they wouldn't.
I'm not
No,
sure.
as I said, I
I
don't know
might
if
be
they'd
in the
say immoral.
minority.
They'd say it's gross.
Yes.
I think you could get like 85% of the population on the that's gross train.
Well, look, every single libertarian is going to say that's not immoral.
Right, but exactly, but they'll say it's gross, but it's not necessarily immoral, right? Or it's not necessarily should be illegal. So
and you're going to get a giant number of leftists who are going to say that's not immoral.
I don't.
So
but the giant number of leftists. You're right, but the giant number of leftists are a tiny minority of people. So
I think you might be able to cobble together a coalition of 30% of people who say that's not immoral.
I think you're going to get 20 or less. So.
Okay. We're not far off. We're only 10% off.
Okay.
Look, we here at the Sitch and Adams show think that that's highly immoral.
There you go. Brian for $10 says, Sitch, your axis of left and right is incomplete. A libertarian can skew right or left because both sides believe in liberalism. The only argument is what the role the government plays in that framework. Well, I mean, and I said this a bunch of times, there are people that are libertarians who skew right, and there are people that are libertarians that personally skew left. The guiding factor between the unifying factor between the two of them is that they both think, whether it's for practical purposes or ideological purposes, which is a longer conversation, they both believe that the government should be basically hands off from their, how they run their lives or how businesses operate. But then personally, they're going to have their own personal moral framework, whether it's going to be more left or right wing aligned.
Yeah, Stephen Hicks lays this out perfectly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It gets confused because too many people want to say no. They think libertarian is exclusively a right wing thing, and if you do that, it kind of fucks up everyone's conception of the political spectrum, except for the minority of libertarians. So. Spencer Harmon for 31 months says, by their fruits you shall know them. I have little regard for what people say. I have all the regard for what they do. Revealed preferences will always tell you more than stated preferences.
True.
That's generally true.
Yeah.
Brian for $20 says, the left wants the government in the economy and not in society. The right says they have a role in upholding the culture, but not the economy. Socialists and fascists are outside of liberalism and are firmly in the collectivist ones. The Jack of some trades for 20 months says, did you guys see the breakdown Destiny did of Anna and Glenn Beck? He said they're both just actors collecting a check. As if he isn't, we know she isn't. I saw that he covered it. I didn't watch his coverage because I knew it'd probably make me mad. So I'm not surprised that he took the dumb fuck, take on all this stuff. And that's the thing. I don't know if he actually believes that. I don't know if it's just strictly performative at this point.
It's performative. Look,
because it's so devoid. It's such a point that's so massively devoid of logic. So I don't know if it's hard for me because obviously, we've seen, Anna's kind of journey throughout the way. I mean, I think our show was the first show she expressed the beginning steps of that journey in the first place. So obviously we have a more closer look at all these steps where, Destiny doesn't. So I don't know if it's that he's just completely grifting on that, or he just is unaware of the length of time, the journey, and the fact that it just doesn't make sense for this to be a grift at all.
Yeah, and look, I've talked to Anna privately quite a bit. Like if that's the case, like she's carrying this act.
Yeah, she's exactly. She's
way beyond like Academy Award winning performance here. So.
Right. Yeah. So
it's just like why? Like
why? So, but it's sad, but not that surprising. Rigo Zoro for 32 months says, S-Class and A-Team are the true axis of enlightenment, and Blunty Fly is the magical third axis that makes everything better. There you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Look, can I put the stars on now, Sitch?
There you go. No, I don't like the stars.
Sitch hates the weed stars.
You can put the stars. Listen, you can put the stars on when we do super chats.
We need to do a poll. I like the stars. Look, nothing says Blunty Fly is getting based.
You guys like the stars?
Like the stars.
If you can put the stars on during the super chats, that's fine.
Okay.
I think they're too distracting normally. But
Look, now Sitch can't even read Superchats.
I can't even read. I just stare at the stars. I'm just going on a journey through space with Buntyfly.
What
So.
says weed? Like being mesmerized by some little animated GIF.
Right, exactly.
It plays into the stereotype perfectly.
Dan Snyder for $2 says people are saying they will lie to get in the jury. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised at all. So
Oh, they're already saying that? Wow.
I'm sure.
Hilarious.
Sure
Well, all those people are stupid as fuck because it's not like those attorneys aren't going to go through their
social media. Yeah.
Yeah. What morons. Fucking idiots.
Right.
Well, they're probably not. They're probably not.
They're not in New
area,
York
so.
anyway. So yeah.
Anyway, all right.
Brog for $5 says using identitarian right would probably be more useful and accurate for some of these groups, less soy and controversial too.
True. Yeah, totally
that's
true.
Paul Fedora says, aren't you on record stating Ashkenazi are smarter? I'm on record saying that my understanding is that whenever they do those, categorizing everyone by their ethnicity IQ test, that they say that the Ashkenazi Jews are at the top. According to what's his name?
There's like 5 guys that massively bring up the average, and most Ashkenazi Jews are like completely idiots. It's like
that's true. I'm one of the 5, but you're correct. Yeah, you're correct. But and it's who's the guy that they wrongly always say is a racist, but he's not. The guy that did the bell curve.
Yeah, I can't remember his name.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
Bell curve writer.
Yeah, there you go.
Charles Murray. Yeah, I believe he was talking about that too when he was talking about all the various IQ stuff. So I don't know if it's true, obviously. I like to believe it's true because that makes me super smart, obviously. My big Ashkenazi IQ. But no, I don't know if it's true. I wonder, though, if it is true. I wonder if it's sort of like this, like it's true for a very dark reason, which is that a lot of the lower IQ Jews got knocked off in the Holocaust. So that'd be pretty fucked up reason.
Wow.
That would be true.
That's dark. That
would be dark. Because I wonder, because you'd say like, because you'd think like, okay, the most.
Oh, you don't have to. I get it.
Well, no, because it'd be like let me just articulate, because some people will probably take it the wrong way. Like the concept would be that the richer and more successful Jews in Europe would have been able to use their resources to escape more likely than those that did not have the resources. So it could be an artificial selection mechanism.
It's weird because Charles Murray's argument, and it might be in the Bell Curve, it might be in one of his other books, but it is that we're structuring society solely rewarding things like IQ. And his argument is that that's not a good thing.
We shouldn't do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
it's interesting because, because he always gets hit with the racist stick. And, it's funny. I just saw recently, it was an older video from a few months ago. He's talking to Glenn Lowry about like how dangerous it is if, white identity politics, white identitarianism becomes a dominant force in America. So this is the guy you're saying is like a white nationalist.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. He's been wrongly tarred, same way as Trump and a lot of other people. So now they're going after Marty McCary. It's fucking all these great people. Anna, they've gone after, right? Jank is still borderline, so maybe he deserves it.
There you go. Zerg 1337 for 6 Aussie bucks says Destiny was making fun of Anna's claim with the homeless man in that Glenn video. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's gross.
Why?
That's gross. Ace for $5 says Destiny is just super bad faith and suffering from TDS to the 9th degree. When it comes down to Anna, Destiny need to pull the butt plug from his bone.
Oh my God.
Right.
Well, Destiny does this thing where he basically tries to bully you into singing his praises and talking to him on his platform and making him look like a superstar.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't do that, then he basically annihilates you. That's like his modus operandi. So you become a cog in his universe, or he just fucking goes after you viciously, which I think is highly immoral.
Right.
Yeah. Like, how are you not just a complete user at that point? Like, if you're just going to mischaracterize everyone who, like, just because they don't sing your praises, then what the fuck?
True. Robert for $5 says, never liked ideology, presumes a particular methodology will obtain the best outcome and refuses to ask which outcomes is the best or why. That is the problem with it. That is definitely the problem with it. So,
yeah, look, I think one of my chief ideologies is pragmatism for this reason. But I mean, yeah, like you need an ideology. It's like also people want to say, you know, obviously a lot of people are against identity politics, but you can't live in life without some kind of identity. Like, obviously, I have
yes.
always thought of myself as an artist. It's a chief part of my identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need an identity. A lot of people build their identity around their vocation, which I think is great. Like a lot of people, you know, I'm an academic. That's my identity. So yeah, it's a necessary thing. So I don't like to talk too much smack about ideology or identity because
right. Everyone has an ideology to understand the world, obviously, but you just have to be more. You have to be aware that it's difficult. On one hand, you use your ideology to exist in life, and you need it to exist in life to make every decision you make on an intuitive level or even a rational level. But then at the same token, you always have to have that little voice in the back of your head that says, "Oh, you could be wrong." So it's a difficult balance. Paul for $2 says racial supremacist confirmed. Wow, false. That is incorrect, Paul. Everyone knows I'm not a racial supremacist. I'm a group supremacist, and that group is S-Class, baby. S-Class is the most supreme class of all time. S-Class forever. Eat shit, 8 team. S-Class is the best class.
Oh my god. Oh my god. You've unleashed a monster.
Okay. Zerg 1337 for $2 says, so Mr. Girl was right about Destiny. I mean, was that the worst person you know meme, right? Worst person you know meme?
Maybe so, yeah. It is. Look, it is hilarious because Mr. Girl was doing that huge hit piece on Destiny,
right?
And he
missed the prime. He had the prime info right there.
Not only that, she was the one that had the prime info. Like, I can't remember her name.
Well, no, she was making the accusation, but I don't think she had the.
No, I think she did. I think she's the one that he was saying all this stuff to.
No. I could be wrong. My understanding was, I forget the woman's name too. She was making all these accusations, which turned out to be like at least partially true, but she didn't have the deets. She didn't have the evidence of the claims. So she's like sitting here like, I'm totally vindicated on all my accusations.
Yeah, I guess that we should look in on her social media. She said she'd come on the show sometime, but I never followed up with her.
I don't really give a shit about
Lav, that's
drama
it.
anyway.
Lav, yes. Lav.
I don't really care about any of this drama enough to have her come on and talk about it, but
dude, it was hilarious. I don't know if you remember, but Mr. Girl was like, he wanted to basically collectivize the Destiny orbiters like in a union type way. Like he wanted to develop a union.
That's funny.
For the Destiny orbiters where they would have certain rights.
Right. Okay. I mean, listen, he's truly on the left. Okay. Destiny was on the left. He should have agreed to that.
He was right in the fact that Destiny is taking advantage of the orbiters. Like he was completely right about that. Yes. The thing that was comical about it was you can leave the fucking orbit, dude. Right. This isn't your job, okay? Your job isn't to be Destiny's orbiter.
Right. Well, and also, I mean, it's comical for that reason. It's also comical because it's like a game sees game scenario. Because he's obviously, Mr. Girl had a lot of weird, mental manipulation tactics.
Of course. So. He's working on his own orbit.
Right. He was too weird, though, to gain an orbit.
Well, and anyway. The way that he came to prominence was just like, there's no backpedaling on that shit. The fucking pedo shit.
The pedo
Come
shit,
on.
yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Even though he did say when we talked to him, I believe he did say he agreed with my analysis of Cuties. So it's not like he admitted that he was wrong about that movie.
I don't remember that.
Well, that got lost by you yelling at him. So that's why I remember.
That was a hilarious live stream. I think I don't even know if it's public anymore, just because we didn't want to blow.
I don't remember. Yeah,
we didn't want to blow him up
right,
because he's such a detestable individual in my estimation. So, which I think I was vindicated on. But the way he came to prominence is like the male equivalent of getting like run through by 100 guys. Right? I mean, it's just how do you resume your normal life?
Right.
After something like that.
Are you saying if that girl that fucked 100 guys in one day, you think if she wanted to do a serious political podcast, you don't think it would work?
She could do that if she was good at it. I'm just you're huh.
I was kind of joking.
I don't know how you can have a normal relationship after that. Like
Oh, right. Yeah.
Like what kind of person is going to be with you after that? I mean, obviously she could find a boyfriend or a husband or whatever, right? But that person is going to be, there's going to be some distance between them, right?
There's always going to be that something there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I don't know that, like, when you get the cancer diagnosis, are they going to be there at your bedside? Probably not. Probably not.
I don't know. Right? It depends on the it definitely shrinks the pool of like applicants. Because there are people that marry porn stars, and I'm like, I couldn't do that. I don't know. I'm not that person. But there are people out there, right?
Look, I think they're probably there for. Yeah, I think they're probably not great partners though. There's some weakness about them, or they're just there for the money. Like I do think like the person is going to be there, but they're going to be there for the money. They're not going to be.
I don't know.
Console you. So,
but anyway, let me read some Streamlabs. Holtzonator for $2 says, I feel like I'm losing my goddamn mind trying to tell people that violence like the CEO getting shot is bad. I don't know anyone in real life who agrees with me, at least until I point out their enemies own all the guns. Yeah, it's pretty sad and crazy how some of those people are in that situation, in that mental space. Holtzonator for $2 says, Adam, I think the term woke originated in the 70s as a positive term to describe being aware of the struggles of the African American community. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
Holtzonator for $2 says, I'm sorry, Adam, but I think Sitch is right. I think leftist ideology is stupid and evil, but it's the authoritarian nature of their beliefs that I think of as woke.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of these scenarios where everyone has like their own. We all have our own views, right?
Look, this is one of the things that was so good about Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind. He like lays out, if you believe this, you're a member of this philosophical school. If you believe this, you're a member of this philosophical school. And he does it completely judgment free. He's like, you're entitled to your beliefs. Like, and I'm one player here in the field of what woke means. So look, if you have a difference of opinion, that's fine.
Sitch's law, baby.
It is. Look, so much of it is just argument over definition. So.
Holtzonator for $5 says, on the other hand, the right didn't write the rules for radicals. They didn't coin the phrase respect the diversity of tactics, or there are no bad tactics, only bad targets. That is true. For another $5, Holtzonator says, so maybe the woke right giving the left exactly what they asked for is justice. Maybe we can step back and let the immune system do its thing.
Oh, wow.
We'll find out. It's interesting because that guy, the Martyr Maid guy, I forget his real name. I was talking to Tucker Carlson about World War II. He kept saying, I'm assuming you weren't quoting him, but he kept saying that fascism is the immune system's reaction to communism. And he keeps repeating this again and again, almost like it's seeming to imply like it's a positive thing. So,
right.
Arrhythmus for $2 says, I'm confused about Lindsay's position on the post-war liberal consensus. Are we pretending that's not a real thing? I'm pretty sure it's totally a real thing, and it's based because liberalism is awesome. Well, I guess it gets into Sitch's law. It's like the social contract thing. It's like, well, what do you mean by the post-liberal consensus? So Arithmus for $4 says the reason I dislike woke right is that American society has hypersensitive right-wing threat detection mechanism, but almost no left-wing threat detection mechanism. Woke finally broke into the mainstream to help identify left-wing threats. Woke right hauls out the culturally understood content of the left-wing threat and could render the new left threat detection mechanism useless in society. This puts us back at square one. I think that's
100%
actually
agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with that completely. I think that's actually a really good point. I think it's a fantastic point. So
Yeah, and this is why I brought up the Jordan Peterson stuff, because it just seems like that's been the project we've had going for years now.
right. Yeah. That's a fantastic point. So, I mean, I think I'm pretty thoroughly convinced against the term I don't think it's effective. And then also what you just said, Arithmus, I think is an excellent point. Solid for 2 hours says John Eastman. Oh, our favorite John Eastman got in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
He got in trouble for taking a quote from the debate over the 14th Amendment and added an "or" to change the meaning.
Really? Wow. Okay. So he's Trump's birthright citizenship guy, John Eastman. Did he ever get his pardon? I don't even remember.
I don't think he did.
I know he was trying to get one.
This is an article you linked. It's from 2015. So is John Eastman just always been a fucking retard? Like, is that what we're learning? I guess 2015, I guess it's the same time, so never mind. It just seems like it's so long ago. So he wrote this article. It says, we can apply the 14th Amendment while also reforming birthright citizenship. Birthright citizenship has exploded national discourse. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I can't read this whole article on stream. Well, I'll look through it afterwards. Maybe we'll talk about it.
He did never get his pardon. He sought a pardon after January 6th, but
right.
Trump was like, if I'm not getting a pardon, you're not getting a pardon. Of course, he has a lot more money for legal defenses. John Eastman might be bankrupt now.
I mean, I hope so. I hope so. Fuck him. Anyways, let me go back to
I think we got a couple more, but
yeah. Fondue. Oh, yeah. Fondue for 2 hours says, can we move on from Destiny from now on? I mean,
we kind of have, yeah.
Yeah, we kind of have. People keep bringing them up in the supers, but we're not really covering Destiny stuff. So Ace for $5 says, okay, after hearing him say that about Anna, sexual assault, fuck him. Tiny can burn in hell.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to check it now just so I can have my own confirmation, but if that's said, that's pretty gross. Obviously, it's disgusting. And he can fuck off. Ace for $5 says, and the only good Destiny has ever done in his life was, oh my God. Holy shit.
That is brutal.
Holy shit. Ace for $5 says the only good Destiny's ever done in his life was never being in his son's life. This will lead to his son not being like him. Wow, Jesus.
Oh my God.
Ace Lane in hardcore. Ace for $5 says, I know. Ace for $5 says, guys, I was the first one to point out that Mr. Girl was right about Destiny. Destiny shows of how much the left doesn't understand psychology at all. Interesting. 1995 Eddie V for $5 says, I agree that Destiny and Pondering are way off about Anna's political journey, but what do you think Jank's newfound happiness about Trump's coalition? I think that Anna is having an effect on getting Jank is changing Jank's mind about a lot of things. So I think that's part of it. And I think part of it is just that I think Jank is opening up to, I don't think it's a grift. I think he is opening up to start to see things through the sort of I shouldn't say mainstream, the populist versus, not populist lens. And he's wondering, he's made this argument and he's laid it all out. If you listen to him, I don't know. I think he's going to not be proven correct because I'm kind of pessimistic about the Trump administration, but we'll see that he's laying out this argument that he thinks that Trump's base, which is populist, which I agree with, will hold him to account if he just kind of does what he did in the first term and sort of just go be essentially mostly, an economic neoliberal Republican of the last 50 years.
Yeah, Jank wants policy achievements. He's always wanted policy achievements more than just some political win for his team. So
right.
And he thinks he might be able to get it out of the Trump administration, which, I mean, I'm I'm agnostic at this point on whether or not Trump can do some good in the world. Like I'm hopeful he can,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm paying very, very close attention here. So, but it is kind of demoralizing. And I think, look, this will be an interesting storyline with Jank and his kind of situation here, because I do think that, I mean, raw politics might get in the way of actually making some tangible progress on policy goals that the left, says they have. Like,
Right.
unfortunately, they're just all creatures of Washington, D.C., and they don't want to see Trump get a win. Like, if Trump
Mm-hmm.
is going to do something that's going to be helpful on healthcare, they're like, oh, healthcare is our issue. We can't let them do anything like that. In the same way that the Republicans feel immigration is their issue, they can't let
Right.
the Democrats do anything on it. So,
Yeah, that's unfortunately the beast of politics. So
but
we'll see.
look,
But I
maybe.
do
Oh, go ahead.
I do think that maybe, and I do not think that Cenk is grifting. I think that's
Oh,
not
I don't either.
true at all. I know, Matt Walsh is going on and on about this because he's personally mad that Cenk's attacking him. I think what you could say, and I think there's truth to this, is that Cenk is trying to make lemonade out of lemons, essentially. So
Trump is a deal maker, and Trump does know the kind of the reality, the social reality of situations a lot more than I think like Kamala Harris did. Definitely, maybe more than Joe Biden did. And like I do think Trump will understand that you need to, like, people need to be able to have a perceived win. Like, I could see Trump structuring something where the Democrats get a perceived win on healthcare or
right,
in exchange for the Republicans getting a perceived win on immigration. I think that would be a better way to structure it.
right,
Like, if they could pass something that is like, oh, the Democrats got everything they wanted on healthcare, and that, oh my God, it's terrible, when it's really, inconsequential to Trump. And the Republicans being able to say that they got everything on immigration and the Democrats got taken to the woodshed. I
mm-hmm.
think that might be like a more like socially feasible arrangement, even though it is, I mean, it's all theater, right? I mean, it really
Right.
is.
It is. Yeah.
That you might like that book, Gradual, Sitch, because this is kind of they lay out like a structure in Gradual where things, like, they build up and build up and build up until they realize like something must be done, and then things start getting done very quickly. So
Okay.
yeah, we'll see what happens.
Solid for $2 says, I'm starting to become uncomfortable with the term libertarian because people interpret it as ANCAP or minarchist, not monarchist, which I'm neither. I do like the phrase, I'm a libertarian, but not a libertarian. That's funny.
Just practice independent. Like, that is going to be your friend right there.
Independent.
Like, so many of these labels. Oh God. Like, you see what some of the libertarian caucus, Twitter feeds are tweeting out, and you're like, oh my God, why the fuck would I want? Why would I want to call myself a libertarian? You're like terrified. But anyway.
Anyways, thank you guys
done?
for
All
yes,
right.
we're done. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for your incredibly generous donations. And we'll see you all on Sunday.
Yeah, I think we're going to do that FD signifier video, right?
We
That's
might, yeah,
do.
unless there's something else that pops up. I haven't watched that video yet, so
we have a great video planned for Sunday. It's going to
Okay.
be amazing. FD signifier goes off, creating all kinds of terrible stereotypes.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
I'm excited.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. All right.
You got to tease it, Sitch.